Stone of Tears, The Sword of Truth, Book 2, by Terry Goodkind. Read by Nick Sullivan. This book contains 703 pages. Chapter 1. Rachel clutched her doll tighter to her chest and stared at the dark thing watching her from the bushes. At least she thought it was watching her. It was hard to tell because the eyes were as dark as the rest of it, except when the light caught them just right. Then they gleamed a golden color. She had seen animals in the woods before, rabbits and raccoons and squirrels and such, but this was bigger. It was as big as her, maybe bigger. Bears were dark. She wondered if it could be a bear. But this wasn't exactly the woods, since it was indoors. She had never been in an indoor woods before. She wondered if indoor woods had animals like the outdoor woods did. She might have been afraid if Chase wasn't there with her. She knew she was safe with him. Chase was the bravest man she ever saw. Still, she was a little afraid. Chase had told her she was the bravest little girl he knew. She didn't want him to think she was afraid of some big rabbit. Maybe that's all it was, some big rabbit sitting on a rock or something. But rabbits had long ears. Maybe it really was a bear. She put her doll's foot in her mouth. She turned and looked down the path, across the pretty flowers and short walls covered with vines, and across the grass to where Chase was talking to Zed, the wizard. They were standing by a stone table looking at the boxes and talking about what to do with them. Rachel was glad that mean Darken Rahl didn't get them, and that he wasn't ever going to be able to hurt anyone again. Rachel turned back to make sure the dark thing wasn't coming any closer to her. It was gone. She looked around, but didn't see it anywhere. "Sarah, where do you think it could have gone?" she whispered. Her doll didn't have an answer. Rachel bit down on Sarah's foot and started walking toward Chase. Her feet wanted to run, but she didn't want Chase to think she wasn't brave. He had said she was brave, and that made her feel good. She looked over her shoulder as she walked, checking, but she didn't see the dark thing anywhere. Maybe it lived in a hole, and it had gone there. Her feet still wanted to run, but she didn't let them. When Rachel got to Chase, she pushed up against him and hugged his leg. He and Zed were talking, and she knew it was impolite to interrupt, so she sucked on Sarah's foot while she waited.
"So, what could happen if you just shut the lid?"
Chase was asking the wizard.
"Anything."
Zed stuck his skinny arms up in the air. His wavy white hair was smoothed down, but it still stuck out in places.
"How should I know? Just because I know what the boxes of Auden are doesn't mean I know what to do with them now that Darken Rahl has opened one. The magic of Auden killed him for opening it. It could have destroyed the world. It could kill me for closing it, or worse."
Chase sighed.
"Well, we can't just leave them sitting around, can we? Don't we have to do something?"
The wizard frowned and looked at the boxes while he was thinking. After more than a minute of quiet, Rachel tugged on Chase's sleeve. He looked down at her. "Chase?"
"Chase, I told you the rules."
He put his hands on his hips and twisted his face up, trying to make it look mean, until she giggled and hugged his leg tighter.
"You've only been my daughter for a few weeks, and already you're breaking the rules. I told you before, you are to call me Father. None of my children are allowed to call me Chase. Understand?"
Rachel grinned and nodded. "Yes, Father." He rolled his eyes and shook his head. Then he mussed her hair.
"What is it?"
"There's some big animal in the trees. I think it might be a bear or worse. I think you might need to take out your sword and go have a look." He laughed.
"A bear in here?" He laughed again. "This is an indoor garden, Rachel. There aren't any bears in an indoor garden. Maybe it was a shadow. The light does odd things in here."
She shook her head. "I don't think so, Father. It was watching me." He smiled and mussed her hair again and put his big hand on the side of her face and hugged her head to his leg.
"Then you just stay by me and it won't bother you."
She sucked Sarah's foot and nodded as he held her head to his leg. She didn't feel so afraid now that his hand was on her, and so looked over to the trees again. The dark thing mostly hidden by one of the vine-covered walls, darted closer. Rachel bit down harder on Sarah's foot and let out a little whimper as she looked up at Chase. He was pointing at the boxes.
And just what is that thing, that stone or jewel or whatever it is? Did it come out of the box?
Zed nodded.
It did. But I don't want to say what I think it is until I'm sure. At least not out loud.
Father, Rachel whined, it's coming closer. He looked down.
Good. You just keep your eye on it for me.
He looked back to the wizard.
What do you mean you don't want to say? Do you think it has something to do with what you said about the veil to the underworld possibly being torn?
Zed frowned while he rubbed his smooth chin with his skinny fingers and looked down at the black jewel sitting in front of the open box.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Rachel looked over to the wall to watch where the dark thing was. She gave a start when she saw the hands reach over the edge of the wall. It was a lot closer. But they weren't hands. They were claws, long, curved claws. She looked up at Chase, at all his weapons, just to be sure he had enough. He had knives, a lot of knives, around his waist, a sword strapped over the back of his shoulder, a big axe hooked to his belt, a few other things that looked like clubs with sharp spikes sticking out of them hanging from his belt, too, and a crossbow on his back. She hoped it was enough. All the weapons scared other men, but they didn't seem to be scaring the dark thing that was coming closer, and the wizard didn't even have a knife. He just wore that plain tan robe, and he was so skinny, not big like Chase. But wizards had magic. Maybe his magic could scare the dark thing away. Magic. Rachel remembered the magic fire stick Wizard Giller had given her. She reached into her pocket and put her fingers around it. Maybe Chase would need her help. She wouldn't let that thing hurt her new father. She would be brave.
Is it dangerous?
Zed looked up at Chase from under his eyebrows.
If it's what I think it is, and it were to fall into the wrong hands, dangerous wouldn't even begin to describe it.
Then maybe we should drop it down a deep hole or destroy it.
Can't. We may need it.
What if we hide it?
That's what I'm thinking. The problem is where. There are things to take into consideration. I need to take Addie to Aidendrill and study the prophecies with her before I know for sure what to do with the stone and what to do about the boxes.
And until then? Until you know for sure?
Rachel looked over to the dark thing. It was closer, as close as the wall came to them. With its claws over the top of the wall, it lifted its head up and looked right into her eyes. The thing grinned at her, showing long, sharp teeth. Her breath caught in her throat. Its shoulders shook. It was laughing. Rachel's eyes were as big as they would go. She could hear her heartbeats, making a whooshing sound in her ears. "Father?" she whined in a small voice. He didn't look down. He just shushed her. The thing put its leg over the wall and dropped down in front, still looking at her, still laughing. Its shiny eyes looked at Chase and Zed. It hissed and then laughed as it hunched down. Rachel tugged Chase's pant leg and strained to make her voice work. "Father, it's coming!"
"All right, Rachel."
"Zed, I still don't know." With a howl, the dark thing sprang into the open. It ran like a streak, just a blur of black. Rachel screamed. Chase spun just as it hit him. Claws flashed through the air. Chase fell to the ground as the thing leapt on Zed. The wizard's arms flailed about. Flashes of light shot from Zed's fingers, bouncing off the dark thing and tearing up dirt or stone where they hit. The thing knocked Zed to the ground. Laughing in a loud howl, it jumped back on Chase as he was pulling his axe from his belt. Rachel screamed again as the claws tore at Chase. The thing was faster than any animal she had ever seen. Its claws were just a blur. Rachel was terrified Chase was being hurt. It flung the axe out of Chase's hand, laughing that awful laugh. It was hurting Chase. Rachel had the fire stick in her hand. She jumped forward and put the fire stick on its back. She screamed the magic words to make the fire stick work. "Light for me!" The dark thing burst into flames. It made a horrible scream as it spun to her. Its mouth opened wide, teeth snapping as flames burned all over it. It laughed again, but not like people laughed when they thought things were funny. Its laugh made her skin prickle. It hunched over and started walking toward her, still on fire, as Rachel backed up. Chase let out a grunt as he threw one of the clubs with the sharp spike sticking out of it. The club hit the thing's back and stuck in its shoulder. It looked around at Chase and laughed as it reached behind and pulled the club from its back. It started for Chase again. Zed was up. Fire flew from his fingers, covering the thing with even more flames. It laughed at Zed. All the fire went out. Smoke rose from it. Its body looked the same now as before it got burned. In fact, it had looked like it was dark from being burned even before Rachel had set it on fire. Chase was on his feet, and there was blood on him. Rachel got tears at seeing that. Chase snatched the crossbow off his back, and in a blink he shot an arrow. It stuck in the thing's chest. With that terrible laugh, it snapped the arrow off. Chase threw aside the crossbow and yanked out the sword from over his shoulder, then ran for the thing, jumping over it as he stabbed with the sword. The thing moved so fast, Chase missed. Zed did something that sent the thing tumbling across the grass. Chase put himself in front of Rachel, pushing her back with one hand while he held the sword out in the other. The thing sprang to its feet again, looking at each of them.
"Walk," Zed yelled at them. "Don't run. Don't stand still."
Chase grabbed Rachel's wrist and started walking backward. Zed started walking backward, too. The dark thing stopped laughing and looked at each of them, blinking. Chase was breathing hard. His chainmail shirt and the tan leather tunic under it had big rips from the claws. Rachel got more tears at all the blood on him. Blood was running down his arm onto her hand. She didn't want him to be hurt. She loved him something fierce. She clutched Sarah and the fire stick tighter. Zed stopped.
"Keep walking,"
he told Chase. The dark thing looked at Zed standing there, and a big grin with sharp teeth came to its face again. It laughed that awful laugh and tore at the ground as it started in a rush toward the wizard. Zed threw his hands up. Dirt and grass flew up in the air around the thing. It was lifted into the air. Bolts of blue lightning struck it from all around before it hit the ground. It howled in laughter as it thudded to the ground, smoking. Something else happened. Rachel couldn't tell what, and the thing stopped with its arms stretched out like it was trying to run, but its feet were stuck. It howled and twisted, but couldn't move. Zed's arms swirled around in circles, and he threw them out once more. The ground shook as if from thunder, and there were flashes of light hitting the thing. It laughed, and there was a breaking sound like wood snapping, and the thing started toward Zed. Zed began walking again. The thing stopped and frowned. Then the wizard stopped and threw his arms out again. A terrible ball of fire went through the air toward the thing as it ran for Zed. The ball of fire made a loud scream and grew bigger as it flew toward the dark thing. The fire hit so hard it made the ground shake. The blue and yellow light was so bright Rachel had to squint as she was walking backward. The ball of fire stayed in that one place as it burned and made a loud roar. Smoking, the dark thing stepped out of the fire, its shoulders shaking as it laughed. The flames went out in little sparks that flew around in the air. "Bags," the wizard said as he started walking backward. Rachel didn't know what bags meant, but Chase had told Zed not to say it in front of little ears. She didn't know what that meant either. The wizard's wavy white hair was all messed up and sticking out in clumps. Rachel and Chase were on the path through the trees, almost to the door. Zed was walking backward toward them as the dark thing watched. Zed stopped, and the thing started coming again. Walls of flame shot up in front of it. The air smelled like smoke and roared with noise. The thing stepped through the wall of fire. Zed made another, and it stepped through that too. When the wizard started walking again, it stopped by a short vine-covered wall, watching. Fat vines ripped off the wall by themselves and grew suddenly longer. They whipped around the dark thing as it stood there, tangling all around it. Zed was almost up with them.
"Where are we going?"
Chase asked him. Zed turned. He looked tired.
"Let's see if we can shut it in here."
The thing tore at the vines as they pulled it to the ground and was slicing through them with its sharp claws as the three of them went through the big doorway. Chase and Zed each took one of the golden metal doors and pushed it shut. From the other side came a howl and then a loud crash. A big dent popped out in the door, knocking Zed to the ground. Chase put a hand on each door and put all his weight against them as the thing pounded from the other side. Horrible screeches came through the metal as the thing clawed at the door. Chase was covered with sweat and blood. Zed jumped to his feet and helped Chase hold the doors closed. A claw stuck through the crack between the two doors and slid down. Then another came out from underneath. Through the door, Rachel could hear the thing laughing. Chase grunted as he pushed. The doors creaked. The wizard stood back and held out his arms with his fingers up like he was pushing against the air. The creaking stopped. The thing howled louder. Zed grabbed Chase's sleeve.
"Get out of here!"
Chase backed away from the doors.
"Is that going to hold it?"
"I don't think so. If it comes for you, walk. Running or standing still attracts its attention. Tell anyone else you see."
"Zed, what is that thing?"
There was another loud crash, and another big dent popped out in the door. The tips of claws broke through the metal and made rips in the door. The noise it made hurt Rachel's ears.
"Go, now!"
Chase snatched her up with an arm around her waist and started running down the hall. Chapter 2. Zed idly fingered the stone through the coarse cloth of his robe, where it was nestled in an inner pocket, as he watched the claws pull back through the rips in the metal. He turned and watched the boundary warden carrying Rachel down the hall. They hadn't gone more than a dozen strides when one of the doors flew off its hinges with a horrific boom. The strong hinges shattered as if they were made of clay. Zed dove out of the way, the gold-clad iron door just missing him as it flew across the hall and crashed against the polished granite wall, sending shards of metal flying and stone dust boiling down the hall. Zed rolled to his feet and ran. The Skreeling bounded out of the Garden of Life and into the hall. Its body was hardly more than a squat skeleton, covered in a veneer of dry, crisp, blackened skin, like a corpse that had dried in the sun for years. White bones stuck out in places where the skin, hanging in flaps here and there, had been torn in the fight, but that didn't seem to bother the creature. It was a thing of the underworld, and not hindered by all the frailties of life. There was no blood. If it could be torn up enough, or hacked apart, maybe it could be stopped, but it was awfully quick. And magic certainly wasn't doing it much harm. It was a creature of subtractive magic. Additive magic was just being absorbed into it like a sponge. Maybe it could be harmed with subtractive magic, but Zed had nothing of that half of the gift. No wizard in the last few thousand years did. Some might have had the calling for the subtractive. Darken Rahl was proof of that, but none had the gift for it. No, his magic wasn't going to stop this thing. At least, the wizard thought, not directly, but maybe indirectly? Zed walked backward as the Skreeling watched with blinking, bewildered eyes. Now, he thought, while it's standing still. Concentrating, Zed gathered the air, making it dense enough to lift the heavy door. He was tired. It took an effort. He pushed the air with a mental grunt, crashing the door onto the back of the Skreeling. Dust rolled up and across the hall as the door slammed the creature to the ground. It howled. Zed wondered if it was howling in pain or anger. The door lifted, stone chips sliding off. The Skreeling held the heavy door up with one clawed hand as it laughed. A woody tendril of the vine he had tried to strangle it with still coiled around its neck.
"Bags," Zed muttered. "Nothing is ever easy."
Zed kept walking backward. The door crashed to the floor as the Skreeling stepped out from underneath it and followed. It was starting to learn that the people who walked were the same ones who ran or stood still. This was an unfamiliar world to it. Zed had to think of something before it learned any more. If only he wasn't so tired. Chase went down a wide marble stairway. Zed followed him at a quick walk. If he had been sure it wasn't Chase or Rachel the Skreeling was after, he would have gone a different way, drawing the danger away from them. But it could just as easily go after them, and he didn't want to leave Chase to fight it alone. A man and a woman, both in white robes, were coming up the stairs. Chase tried to turn them around, but they slipped past him.
"Walk!" Zed yelled at them. "Don't run! Go back or you will be killed!"
They frowned at him in confusion. The Skreeling was shuffling along toward the stairs, its claws clicking and scraping on the marble floor. Zed could hear it panting with that nerve-jarring near laughter. The two people saw the dark thing and froze, their blue eyes going wide. Zed shoved them, turning them around and forcing them back down the stairs. They both suddenly broke into a run, bounding down the stairs 3 at a time, their blonde hair and white robes flying.
"Don't run!"
Zed and Chase yelled at the same time. The Skreeling rose up on its clawed toes, attracted by the sudden movement. It let out a cackling laugh and darted to the stairs. Zed threw a fist of air, hitting it in the chest, knocking it back a pace. It hardly noticed. It peered over the carved stone railing at the top and saw the people running. With a cackle, it grasped the railing and leapt over, dropping a good 20 feet to the 2 running white-robed figures. Chase immediately put Rachel's face to his shoulder and reversed direction, coming back up the stairs. He knew what was going to happen, and there was nothing he could do about it. Zed waited at the top.
"Hurry, while it's distracted."
There was a very brief struggle and screams that were just as brief. Howling laughter echoed in the stairwell. Blood splattered in an arc up the white marble, almost to where Chase was charging up the stairs. Rachel hid her face against him and hugged his neck tight, but didn't make a sound. Zed was impressed by her. He had never seen one so young use her head as well as she did. She was smart and gutsy. He understood why Giller had used her to try to keep the last box of Orden away from Darken Rahl. The way of wizards, Zed thought, using people to do what must be done. The 3 ran down the hall until the Skreeling appeared at the top of the stairs. Then they slowed to a backward walk. The Skreeling grinned with blood-red teeth, its deathless black eyes momentarily reflecting golden in the sunlight coming in a tall, narrow window. It winced at the light, licked the blood off its claws, and then loped after them. They went down the next stairway. The creature followed, sometimes stopping briefly in confusion, seemingly unsure if it was them it was after. Chase held Rachel in one arm and a sword in his other hand. Zed stayed between them and the Skreeling as they backed down a small hall. The Skreeling climbed up the walls, scratching the smooth stone, and sprang across tapestries, tearing them with its claws as it followed the 3. Polished walnut side tables, each with 3 ornate legs carved in vines and dotted with gilded blossoms, tipped over into the hall as the Skreeling pushed at them with a claw, grinning and laughing at the sound of cut glass vases shattering on the stone floor. Water and flowers spilled over carpets. The Skreeling hopped down and tore a priceless blue and yellow Tanamuran carpet to shreds as it howled in laughter, and then skittered up the wall to the ceiling. It advanced along the ceiling like a spider, head hanging down, watching them.
"How can it do that?" Chase whispered.
Zed only shook his head as they backed into the immense central halls of the People's Palace. The ceiling here was well over 50 feet high, a collection of 4 pointed ribbed vaults held up by a column at the corner of each vault. Suddenly, the Skreeling sprang along the ceiling of the small hall it was in and leapt at them. Zed released a bolt of fire as the creature flew through the air. He missed, the fire boiling up the granite wall, leaving a trail of black soot before it dissipated. For the first time, Chase didn't miss. With a solid strike, his sword lopped off one of the Skreeling's arms. For the first time, the Skreeling howled in pain. It tumbled around on the ground and darted behind a green-veined gray marble column. The severed arm lay on the stone floor, twitching and grasping. Soldiers came running across the vast hall, their swords to hand, the clatter of their armor and weapons reverberating off the vaulted ceilings high overhead, their boot strikes echoing off the tiles around the devotion pool as they skirted it. D'Haran's soldiers were a fierce lot, and they looked all the more so at finding there was an invader in the palace. Zed felt an odd sort of apprehension at the sight of them. A few days ago they would have dragged him off to the former Master Rahl to be killed. Now they were the loyal followers of the new Master Rahl, Zed's grandson, Richard. As Zed saw the soldiers coming, he realized the halls were filled with people. The afternoon devotion had just ended. Even if the Skreeling did have only one arm, this could be a bloodbath. The Skreeling could kill a few dozen of them before they even thought to run. And then it would kill more when they did. They had to get all these people away. The soldiers rushed up around the wizard, eyes hard, searching, ready, looking for the cause of the commotion. Zed turned to the commander, a heavily muscled man in leather and a polished breastplate with the ornate letter R embossed on it, the symbol of the House of Rahl. The scars of rank were incised on upper arms covered only with coarse mail sleeves. Intense blue eyes glowered out from under his gleaming helmet. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "What is it?"
"Get these people out of this hall. They are all in danger."
The commander's face reddened behind the cheek plates of his helmet. "I'm a soldier, not a bloody sheepherder." Zed gritted his teeth.
"And a soldier's first duty is to protect people. If you don't get these people out of this hall, Commander, I will see to it you become a sheepherder."
The commander's fist snapped to his heart in salute, his voice suddenly controlled at realizing who he was arguing with. "By your command, Wizard Zorander." He turned his anger instead on his men. "Get everyone back, right bloody now. Spread rank, sweep the hall." The soldiers fanned out, pushing a wave of startled people before them. Zed hoped they could get them all clear, and then maybe, with the soldiers' help, they could bottle up the Skreeling and hack it to pieces. But then the Skreeling launched itself from behind the column, a black streak tearing across the floor. It tumbled into a bunched knot of onlookers the soldiers were herding back, toppling many over one another to the floor. Shrieks and wails and the Skreeling's hideous laughter erupted from across the hall. Soldiers fell upon the creature and were flung back, bloodied, as more came to their aid. In the panicked clump of people, the soldiers couldn't swing a sword or axe with any effect as the Skreeling tore a bloody path through the bodies. It had no more caution for the armed soldiers than unarmed innocents. It simply ripped at anyone close enough.
"Bags," Zed cursed.
He turned to Chase.
"Stick close to me. We have to draw it away."
He looked around.
"Over there, the devotion pool."
They ran to the square pool of water that was situated under an opening in the roof. Sunlight streamed down, reflecting in rippling patterns on the column at one of its corners. A bell perched on the dark pitted rock that sat off-center in the water. Orange fish glided through the shallow pool, unconcerned with the mayhem above. Zed was getting an idea. The Skreeling certainly wasn't bothered by fire. The most it did when hit with it was steam a little. He ignored the sounds of pain and dying and stretched his hands out over the water, gathering its warmth, preparing it for what he was going to do. He could see shimmering waves of heat just above the surface of the water. He held the rising heat at that point, just below ignition.
"When it comes," he told Chase, "we have to get it in the water."
Chase nodded. Zed was glad the boundary warden wasn't one who always needed to have things explained to him and knew better than to waste precious seconds with questions. Chase set Rachel on the floor.
"Stay behind me," he told her.
She, too, asked no questions. She nodded and hugged her doll close. Zed saw she was clutching the fire stick in her other hand. Gutsy indeed. He turned to the uproar across the hall, lifted a hand, and sent tickling tongues of flame into the flailing dark thing in its center. The soldiers fell back. The Skreeling straightened, turning, dropping a disembodied arm from its teeth as it did so. Steam rose where the flames had licked it. It hissed a cackling laugh at the wizard standing there in the sunlight by the pool. The soldiers were pushing the remaining people down the halls, although the people no longer needed the encouragement. Zed rolled balls of fire across the floor. The Skreeling batted them out of the way, and they sparked out. Zed knew the fire wouldn't harm it. He only wanted to draw its attention. It worked.
"Don't forget," he said to Chase, "in the water."
You don't mind if it's dead when it goes in, do you?
"All the better."
With a clatter of claws against stone, the Skreeling charged across the hall. The tips of the claws scratched into the floor, sending little spurts of stone dust behind along with flakes and chips. Zed hit it with compacted knots of air, hammering it down, keeping its attention, trying to slow it down enough so they might be able to handle it. It came to its feet in a rush each time, charging onward. Chase crouched a little lower in readiness, now holding a 6-bladed mace in his fist instead of the sword. The Skreeling made an impossible leap through the air at the wizard, landing on him with a howl before he had a chance to turn it aside. As he was thrown to the floor, Zed wove webs of air to keep the thrashing claw at bay. Teeth snapped viciously at his throat. Man and beast rolled over once, and when the Skreeling came up on top, Chase swung the mace at its head, hitting a glancing blow. It spun to him, and he slammed it square in the chest, knocking it off the wizard. Zed could hear bones snapping with the blow. The Skreeling seemed hardly to notice. Its one arm swept out, yanking Chase's legs out from under him, and then sprang on his chest as he hit the floor with a hard grunt. Zed struggled to regain his wits. Rachel laid the fire stick on the Skreeling's back, and flames burst up. Zed pushed it with air, trying to knock it in the water, but the Skreeling held on to Chase with its claw to keep from being pushed. Angry black eyes glared out from behind the fire. Lips curled back in a snarl. Chase brought the mace up with both hands, catching the powerful creature square in the back. The impact knocked the Skreeling into the pool. Hissing steam rose upon the contact of flame and water. Instantly, Zed ignited the air above the water, using the heat in the water to feed it. The wizard's fire sucked all warmth from the water. The entire pool froze into a solid block of ice. The Skreeling was encased. The fire sputtered out when the heat feeding it was exhausted. There was sudden quiet, except for the moans from the injured across the hall. Rachel fell on Chase, her voice choked with tears. "Chase! Chase, are you all right?" He put an arm around her as he levered himself into a sitting position.
"That I am, little one."
Zed could see that wasn't entirely true.
"Chase, go sit on that bench. I have to help those people, and I don't want little eyes to see what's over there."
He knew this appeal would work better than telling Chase he didn't want him walking around with his injuries until they could be seen to. Still, Zed was a little surprised when Chase nodded without protest. The commander and 8 of his men rushed up. A few of them were bloody. One had ragged claw cuts right through the metal of his breastplate. They all cast an eye to the Skreeling, frozen in the pool. "Nice bit of work, Wizard Zorander." The commander gave a small nod and a smile of respect. "There are a few over there who are still alive. Is there anything you can do for them?"
"I'll have a look. Commander, have your men use their battle axes to hack that thing to pieces before it figures out how to melt the ice."
His eyes went wide. "You mean it's still alive?" Zed gave a grunt to indicate that it was so.
"The sooner the better, Commander."
The men already had their crescent axes unhooked from their belts, waiting for the order. The commander gave them a nod, and they charged onto the ice, swinging before they slid to a stop. He lowered his voice. "Wizard Zorander, what is that thing?" Zed looked from the man's face over to Chase, who was listening intently. He held the boundary warden's gaze.
"It's a Skreeling."
Chase didn't show any reaction. The boundary warden rarely did. Zed turned back to the commander. The big man's blue eyes were wide. "The Skreelings are loose," he whispered. "Wizard Zorander, you can't be serious." Zed studied the man's face. He saw scars he hadn't seen before, scars earned in battles to the death. For a Daharan soldier, there rarely was any other kind. This was a man not used to letting fear show in his eyes, even in the face of death. Zed sighed. He hadn't slept in days. After the Quads had come and tried to capture Kalen, and she thought Richard had been killed, she had gone into the Kondar, the Blood Rage, killing their attackers. She, Chase, and Zed had walked for 3 days and nights to reach the palace, for her to extract vengeance. There was no stopping a confessor in the grip of the Kondar, that ancient mix of magics. Then they had been captured and discovered Richard alive. That was only yesterday, but it seemed forever ago. Darken Rahl had worked all night drawing forth the magic of Orden from the 3 boxes as they had watched, helpless, and only this morning was he killed by opening the wrong box. Killed by the wizard's first rule, wielded by Richard. Proof that Richard had the gift, even if Richard didn't believe it, for only one with the gift could use the wizard's first rule on a wizard of Darken Rahl's talent. Zed glanced over momentarily at the men hacking at the Skreeling in the ice.
"What is your name, Commander?"
The man stiffened proudly to attention.
"Commander General Trimac, First File of the Palace Guard."
"First File? What are they?"
Pride stiffened the man's jaw even more.
"We are the ring of steel around Lord Rahl himself, Wizard Zorander, 2,000 strong. We fall to a man before harm gets a glance at Lord Rahl."
Zed nodded.
"Commander General Trimac, a man in your position knows that one of the responsibilities of rank is to bear the burden of knowledge in silence and solitude."
"I do."
"Your knowledge that this creature is a Skreeling is one of those burdens. For the time being, anyway."
Trimac let out a heavy breath and gave a nod.
"I understand."
He looked over to the people on the floor across the hall.
"About the injured, Wizard Zorander?"
Zed had respect for a soldier who held concern for wounded innocents. His disregard before had been duty, not callousness. His instinct had been to meet the attack. Zed started across the hall with Trimac at his side.
"You know Darken Rahl is dead."
"Yes, I was in the Grand Courtyard earlier today. I saw the new Lord Rahl before he flew away on the Red Dragon."
"And you will serve Richard as loyally as you have served in the past?"
"He is a Rahl, is he not?"
"He is a Rahl."
"And he has the gift?"
"He does."
Trimac nodded.
"To the last man, before harm gets a glance at him."
Zed glanced over.
"He will not be an easy man to serve under. He's headstrong."
"He is a Rahl that says the same thing."
Zed smiled in spite of himself.
"He is also my grandson, although he doesn't know it yet. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even know he is a Rahl, or the Lord Rahl. Richard might not take well to the position he finds himself in, but someday he is going to need you. I would take it as a personal favor, Commander General Trimac, if you would give him a little understanding."
Trimac's eyes surveyed the area, ever ready for any new danger.
"I would give him my life."
"I think understanding would serve him better in the beginning. He thinks of himself as nothing more than a woods guide. He is a leader by nature and by birth, but not by his own appraisal. He will not want anything to do with it, but it has come to him nonetheless."
At last, a smile came to Trimac's face.
"Done."
He stopped and turned to the wizard.
"I am a Daharan soldier. I serve the Lord Rahl, but the Lord Rahl must also serve us. I am the steel against steel. He must be the magic against magic. Without the steel, he may still survive, but without the magic, we will not. Now tell me what a Skreeling is doing out of the underworld."
Zed sighed and gave a nod.
"Your former Lord Rahl was meddling with dangerous magic. Underworld magic. He tore the veil between this world and the underworld."
"Bloody fool. He's supposed to serve us, not take us into eternal night. Someone should have killed him."
"Someone did. Richard."
Trimac grunted.
"Then Lord Rahl is already serving us."
A few days ago, some would have viewed that thought as treason.
It is a greater treason to deliver the living to the dead.
Yesterday, you would have killed Richard to keep him from harming Dark and Rahl.
And yesterday he would have killed me to get at his foe. But now we serve each other. Only a fool walks into the future backward.
Zed nodded and offered a small but warm smile of respect. But then his eyes narrowed as he leaned closer.
If the veil is not closed, Commander, and the Keeper is loosed on the world, everyone will share the same fate. It won't be just Dahara, but the whole of the world that is consumed. From what I have read of the prophecies, Richard may be the only one who can close the veil. You just remember that, if harm tries to get a glance at Richard.
Trimac's eyes were ice. Steel against steel, that he may be the magic against magic.
Good. You have it right.
Chapter 3. Zed surveyed the dead and dying as he approached. It was impossible to avoid walking through the blood. His heart ached at seeing the hurt. Only one Skreeling. What if more came?
Commander, send for some healers. There are more here than I can tend to.
Already done, Wizard Zorander. Zed nodded and began checking the living. Soldiers of the first file were spread out among the bodies, pulling the dead, many of whom were their own, out of the way and comforting the hurt. Zed put his fingers to the sides of foreheads to feel the injuries, to feel what a healer could care for and what required more. He touched a young soldier laboring to breathe through a gurgle of blood. Zed grunted at what he felt. He glanced down and saw rib bones pulled through a fist-sized hole in his breastplate. Zed's stomach wanted to erupt. Trimac knelt on the other side of the young man. The wizard's eyes flicked up at the commander, and the other nodded his understanding. The young man's remaining breaths of life numbered in the few dozen. "Go on," the commander said in a quiet voice. "I'll stay with the lad." Zed moved on as Trimac gripped the young man's hand in his own and began telling a reassuring lie. 3 women in long brown skirts, sewn with rows of pockets, came up in a rush. Their mature faces took in the scene without flinching. With bandages and poultices pulled from their big pockets, the 3 women descended on the wounded and began stitching and administering potions. Most wounds were within the skill of the women to heal, or else beyond the skill of the wizard. Zed asked one of the 3, the one who looked least likely to pay heed to protests, to go see to Chase. Zed could see him sitting on the bench across the hall, his chin against his chest, Rachel sitting on the floor with her arms wrapped around his leg. Zed and the other 2 healers moved among the people on the floor, helping where they could, passing on where they couldn't. One of the healers called to him. She was hunched over a middle-aged woman who was trying to wave her away. "Please," she was saying in a weak voice, "help the others. I am fine. I need only to rest. Please, help the others." Zed felt the wetness of his blood-soaked robes against his knees as he knelt beside her. She pushed his hands away with one of hers. The other held her guts from spilling out of a ripping wound in her abdomen. "Please, there are others who should be helped." Zed lifted an eyebrow to her ashen face. A fine gold chain through her hair held a blue stone against her forehead. The blue stone matched her eyes so that it almost made her look to have 3 eyes. The wizard thought he recognized the stone and wondered if it could be true or only a bauble bought on a whim. He had not seen one wearing the stone as a calling in a very long time. Surely one this young couldn't know what it proclaimed.
I am Wizard Zedicus Zul'Zorander, and who are you, child, to give me orders?
Her face paled even more. "Forgive me, wizard." She calmed as Zed touched his fingers to her forehead. The pain caught his breath so sharply that he jerked his fingers away. He had to struggle to keep the tears of hurt from showing. He knew without a doubt now she wore the stone in calling, the stone to match the color of her eyes and worn over the forehead, as if the mind's eye was a talisman to proclaim her inner vision. A hand snatched at the back of his robes, tugging.
"Wizard," came a sour voice from behind, "you will tend to me first."
Zed turned to a face that matched the voice and maybe outdid it a little.
"I am Lady Ordith Condatith de Dakidvich, House of Bergalas. This wench is nothing but my body servant. Had she been as quick as she should have been, I wouldn't be suffering so. I could have been killed as slow as she was. You will tend to me first. I could expire at any moment."
Zed could tell without touching her that her injuries were minor.
"Forgive me, my lady."
He made a show of putting his fingers to her head. As he thought, a hard bruise to her ribs, a few lesser to her legs, and a small gash on her arm, requiring at most a stitch or two.
"Well?"
She clutched at the silver ruffles at her neck.
"Wizards,"
she muttered.
"Next to worthless, if you want to know the truth of it. And these guards? I think they were asleep at their posts. Lord Rawle shall hear of this. Well, what of my injuries?" "My lady, I'm not sure there is anything I can do for you." "What?"
She snatched the neck of his robe and gave it a snug yank.
"You had better see that there is, or I will see that Lord Rawle has your head on a pike. See what good your lazy magic does you then." "Of course, my lady. I will endeavor to do my best."
He ripped the small gash in the dark maroon satin fabric of the sleeve, making it a huge hanging flag, then put a hand back on the shoulder of the woman with the blue stone. She moaned as he blocked some of her pain and gave her strength. Her ragged breathing evened. He kept his hand on her, trickling in a little magic of reassurance and comfort. Lady Ordith shrieked, "My dress! You've ruined it!" "Sorry, my lady, but we can't risk the wound festering. I would rather lose the dress than the arm, wouldn't you agree?" "Well, yes, I guess 10 or 15 stitches should do it," he said to the sturdily built healer bent over between the two women on the floor. Her hard, blue-gray eyes glanced to the small wound and then back to the wizard.
"I am sure you would know best, Wizard Zorander,"
she said in an even voice, betraying only in her gaze to him that she understood his true intent.
"What? You are going to let this ox of a midwife do your work for you?" "My lady, I'm an old man. I've never had any talent for sewing, and my hands shake something awful. I'm afraid I would do more damage than I would repair, but if you insist, I will try my best." "No," she sniffed. "Let the ox do it." "Very well."
He looked up to the healer. No emotion touched her features, but splotches of red colored her cheeks.
"I fear there is only one hope for her other injuries, considering the pain she is in. Do you have any wattle root in those big pockets of yours?"
She gave a little frown of puzzlement.
"Yes, but—" "Good," he cut her off. "I think 2 cubes should be sufficient."
Her eyebrow lifted.
2? "Don't you try to be skimpy with me,"
Lady Ordith screeched.
"If there isn't enough to go around, then someone of lesser importance will just have to go short. You give me the full dose." "Very well." Zed glanced up at the healer. "Administer her the full dose. 3 cubes, shredded, not whole."
The healer's eyes opened a little wider, and she incredulously mouthed, "Shredded?" Zed squinted and nodded his insistence. The corners of her mouth curled up in a tightly controlled smile. Wattle root would take away the pain of the minor injuries, but it needed only be swallowed whole. 1 small cube was all that was needed. Shredded, and that much of it, would set Lady Ordith's plumbing afire. The good lady was going to be spending the better part of the next week in her privy.
"What is your name, my dear?"
he asked the healer.
"Kelly Hellick."
Zed let out a tired sigh.
"Kelly, are there any others that are beyond your considerable talents?"
"No, sir. Medea and Annalie are finishing with the last of them."
"Then will you please take Lady Ordith somewhere where she will be more comfortable while you tend to her?"
Kelly glanced down at the woman Zed had a comforting hand to, to the rip across her abdomen, and back up to his eyes.
Of course, Wizard Zorander. You look to be very tired. If you would come to me later, I will fix you a Stenadine tea.
The small smile touched the corners of her mouth again. Zed couldn't keep a grin from his own face. Besides restoring alertness, Stenadine tea was also used to give lovers stamina. By the glint in her eye, he judged her to be a fine brewer of Stenadine tea. He gave Kelly a wink.
Perhaps I will.
Any other time he might have given it serious consideration. Kelly was a handsome woman, but right now that was just about the farthest thing from his mind.
Lady Ordith, what is your body servant's name?
Jebra Bevinvier. And a worthless girl she is too, lazy and impudent.
Well, you will not be burdened with her inadequate service any longer. She is going to need a long time to recover, and you are shortly going to be leaving the palace.
Leaving? What do you mean, leaving?
She put her nose in the air.
I have no intention of leaving.
The palace is no longer safe for a lady of your importance. You will have to leave for your own protection. As you said yourself, the guards are asleep half the time. You will have to be on your way.
Well, I simply have no intention of...
Kelly,
he gave her a firm look.
Please help Lady Ordith to a place where you can tend to her.
Kelly was dragging the Lady Ordith off like a load of wash before she had a chance to cause any more trouble. Zed turned a warm smile to Jebra and brushed some of her short sandy hair back off her face. She held one arm across her grievous wound. Zed had managed to halt most of the bleeding, but that wasn't going to save her. What was outside had to be put back in its place inside.
Thank you, sir. I'm feeling much better now. If you could help me to my feet, I will be out of your way.
Lie still, child, he said softly. We must talk.
With a hard glance, he moved onlookers back. Soldiers of the first file had only to see that one brief look, and they were already pushing people away. Her lip trembled as her breast rose and fell more rapidly. She gave a little nod. Her eyes blinked.
I'm going to die, aren't I?
I won't lie to you, child. Your wound is at the limit of my talents, were I well rested. You don't have the time for me to rest. If I don't do something, you will die. If I try, I might hasten the end.
How long?
If I do nothing, maybe hours, maybe the night. I could ease the pain enough to at least make the last of it tolerable.
She closed her eyes as tears seeped from the corners.
I never thought I cared to live.
Because of the seer's stone you wear?
Her eyes snapped open.
You know? You recognize the stone? You know what I am?
I do. The time is long past when people knew a seer by the stone. But I am old. I have seen much before. That is why you didn't want me to help you? You fear what the touch might do to me?
She nodded weakly.
But I find I suddenly care to live.
Zed patted her shoulder.
That is what I wanted to know, child. Worry not about me. I am a wizard of the First Order, not some novice.
First Order?
She whispered, wide-eyed.
I did not know one was left. Please, sir, do not risk yourself on the likes of me.
Zed smiled.
Not much of a risk, only a little pain. And my name is Zed.
She thought a moment. Then her free hand clutched his arm.
Zed, if I am to have a choice, I choose to try for life.
Zed smiled a little and stroked her cold, sweaty forehead.
Then I promise to give you my most earnest effort.
She nodded as she gripped his arm, gripped her only chance.
Is there anything you can do, Jebra, to hold aside the pain of the visions?
She bit her lower lip and shook her head as tears sprang anew.
I'm sorry, she whispered, barely audible. Perhaps you shouldn't.
Hush, child, he comforted.
Zed took a deep breath and laid a hand over the arm that held her guts back. He put the palm of his other hand gently over her eyes. This was not something he could fix from the outside. It had to be repaired from within, with her own mind's aid. It could kill her, and him. He braced himself and released the barrier in his mind. The impact of pain took the wind from his lungs. He didn't dare to spare the energy to draw a breath. He gritted his teeth and fought it with muscles hardened to stone with the strain. And he hadn't even touched the pain of the wound yet. He had to deal with the pain of her visions, get past them before he could cope with that problem. Agony sucked his mind into a river of blackness. Specters of her visions swirled past. He could only guess at their meaning, but the pain of their reality was all too vivid. Tears flooded from his tightly closed eyes. His whole body shook as he struggled to fight through the torrent of anguish. He knew he couldn't allow himself to be pulled along with it, or he would be lost, consumed. The emotions of her visions buffeted him as he was swept deeper into her mind. Dark thoughts just beyond the surface of perception clawed at his will, trying to drag him into the depths of hopeless abandon. His own painful memories washed to the surface of his consciousness to join with Jebra's lifetime of sorrow in a convergence of terrible agony and madness. Only his experience and resolve kept his sanity, his free will, from being pulled into the bottomless waters of bitterness and grief. At last, he broke through to the calm white light at the center of her being. Zed reveled in the comparatively mild pain of her life-threatening wound. Reality could seldom match the imagination, and in the imagination, the pain was real. All around the calm center, the cold darkness of eternal night encroached on the waning warmth and light of her life, impatient to shroud forever Jebra's spirit. Zed pulled back that shroud to let the light of his gift warm her spirit with life and vitality. The shadows receded before the power of his additive magic. The strength of that magic, its exigency for the well-being of life, drew the exposed organs back to where the Creator intended them. Zed didn't yet dare to spare anything to block her suffering. Jebra's back arched. She wailed in pain. He, too, felt her pain. His own abdomen flamed with the same agony she felt. He shook with the searing sharpness of it. When the hardest, that which was beyond his comprehension, was finished, he at last spared a portion of the magic to block her pain. Jebra sagged against the floor with a moan of relief. He felt the relief in his own body. Directing the flow of magic, Zed finished the healing. He used his power to pull her wound together, letting tissue knit to tissue, flesh to flesh, layer upon layer, up to the surface of skin, joining as if it had never been parted. Finished at last, Zed had only to escape her mind. That was as dangerous as entering, and his strength was nearly gone. He had given it over to her. Rather than wasting any more time worrying about it, he released himself into the flow of agony. Nearly an hour after he had begun, he found himself on his knees, hunched over, weeping uncontrollably. Jebra was sitting up with her arms around him, holding his head to her shoulder. As soon as he was aware that he was back, he managed to bring himself under control and straighten. He glanced around the hall. Everyone had been pushed back a goodly distance, beyond earshot. None had any interest in being near a wizard when he was wielding magic that left people screaming, as Jebra had done.
"There,"
he said at last, with a modicum of restored dignity.
"That wasn't so bad. I believe all is well now."
Jebra laughed a quiet, shaky laugh and hugged him tight.
"I was taught a wizard couldn't heal a seer."
Zed managed to get a bony finger in the air.
"No ordinary wizard can, my dear, but I am Zedicus Zool Zaranda, wizard of the First Order."
Jebra wiped a tear from her cheek.
"I have nothing of value to repay you with except this."
She unhooked the gold chain that ran through her hair and brought it down, putting it in his hand.
"Please accept this humble offering."
Zed looked down at the chain with the blue stone.
"That is very kind of you, Jebra Bevenvier. I am touched."
Zed felt a pang of guilt for having planted the impulse in her mind.
It's a fine chain, and I will accept it in humble gratitude.
He used a thread-thin stream of power to separate the stone from its mounting. He handed the stone back. He only needed the chain.
But the chain is payment enough. Keep your stone. It's yours by right.
She closed her fingers around the stone with a nod and gave him a kiss on the cheek. He accepted the peck with a smile.
And now, my dear, you will need to rest. I have used a good deal of your strength to put things right. Maybe a few days of bed rest, and you will be as good as new.
I fear that you have not only left me healed, but also without employment. I must find work to feed myself. She looked down at the bloody, shredded rip in her green dress. And to clothe myself.
Why were you wearing the stone, if you were the servant of the Lady Ordith?
Not many know what the stone signifies. Lady Ordith didn't. Her husband, the Duke, did. He wanted my services, but his wife would never have allowed a woman in his employ, so he had me placed as her servant. I know it is not the most honorable thing for a seer to place herself covertly, but there is much starvation in Bergalas. My family knew of my ability and closed their doors to me, afraid of the visions I might have of them. Before my grandmother passed on, she put her stone in my hand, saying if I wore hers, she would be honored. Jebra pressed the fist with the stone to her cheek. Thank you, she whispered, for not accepting it, for understanding. Zed felt a renewed pang of guilt.
And so this Duke had you taken in, and used you for his own purposes?
Yes, maybe a dozen years ago. Because I was Lady Ordith's body servant, I was almost always present at any meeting or function. The Duke would come to me later, and I would tell him what I saw of his adversaries. With my help, he made more of his power and wealth. Virtually no one anymore knows of the Stone of a Seer. He disdained people who ignored the old knowledge. He mocked his opponent's ignorance by having me wear the stone openly. He also had me keep an eye to the Lady Ordith. It prevented her from succeeding at making herself a widow. So she now contents herself with being absent from the Duke's house whenever she can. She will not be displeased to be rid of me. The Duke used his strings of power to keep me employed when the Lady Ordith would have wished it otherwise.
Why would she be displeased with your service?
He grinned.
Are you lazy and rude, as she claims?
Jebra smiled back, the fine wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deepening. No, it's the visions. Sometimes when I have them, well, you felt some of the hurt when you healed me, though it is not as bad as that for me, I think. But sometimes the hurt keeps me from her service for a time. Zed rubbed his chin.
Well, since you are out of employment, you will be a guest here at the People's Palace until you are recovered. I have some little influence around here.
He marveled at the sudden truth of that, and pulled a purse from a pocket in his robes. He gave it a jingle.
For your expenses and wage, if I could convince you to take up a new employer.
She hefted the purse in her palm, testing its weight. If this be copper, it is insufficient for any but you. She smiled and leaned a little closer, her eyes merry and scolding at the same time. And if it be silver, it is too much. Zed gave her a grave expression.
It's gold.
Startled, she blinked.
But it is not me mainly you will be working for.
She stared at the purse of gold in her hand, then looked back at him. Who then?
Richard, the new Lord Ral.
Jebra paled and shook her head vigorously, her shoulders hunching up. She shoved the purse back in Zed's hands. No. Even paler, she shook her head again. No, I'm sorry. I don't want to work for him. No. Zed frowned.
He is not an evil person. He's quite kind-hearted, in fact.
I know that.
You know who he is?
She looked down at her lap and nodded. I know. I saw him yesterday, the first day of winter.
And you had a vision when you saw him?
Her voice was weak and filled with fear. Yes.
Jebra, tell me what you saw, every bit of it. Please? It's important.
She looked up at him from under her eyebrows for a long moment, then back down at her lap as she chewed her lower lip. It was at the morning devotion yesterday. When the bell rang, I went to a square, and he was standing there looking into the pool. I noticed him because he was wearing the sword of the Seeker, and because he was tall and handsome. And he wasn't kneeling as the others were. He stood there, watching the people gathering, and as I approached, his eyes passed across my sight, just for an instant. The power coming from him took my breath away. A seer can sense certain kinds of power, like the gift emanating from a person. She looked up at Zed. I have seen those with the gift before. I have seen their auras. They have all been like yours. There is a warmth to them, a gentleness. Your aura is beautiful. His was different. It had that, but more, too.
Violence,
Zed said in a soft voice.
He is the Seeker.
She nodded. It could be. I don't know. I've never seen the like of it before, but I can tell you what it felt like. It felt like having my face pushed into a basin of icy water before I had a chance to get a breath. Sometimes I never get a vision from a person. Sometimes I do. I can never tell when it's going to come. Sometimes when a person is in distress, they throw off auras and visions more strongly. He was throwing off auras like lightning in a thunderstorm. He was in great emotional pain, like an animal in a trap trying to chew its own leg off. He felt the horror of having to betray his friends to save them. I didn't understand that. It didn't make any sense. There was an image of a woman, a beautiful woman with long hair. Maybe a confessor, although I don't know how that could be. The aura flamed so strongly with anguish for her that I felt my face, fearing I would find the skin burned. If I hadn't been at devotion, I would have fallen to my knees anyway from the agony of the auras. I almost rushed to him to comfort him when two moored Sith approached and noticed him standing and not kneeling. He felt no fear, but he went to his knees anyway out of resignation to the terrible betrayal he had been forced into. I was relieved when he knelt. I thought that would be the end of it. I was thankful I had seen only auras for the most part and not true visions. I didn't want to see any visions from that man. She stared off, seemingly lost in the memory of it.
But that wasn't the end of it.
Her eyes came back to where she was. No. I thought the worst of it was over, but what I had seen didn't touch what was to come. Jebra dry-washed her hands for a moment. We were saying the chant to Father Rahl, and all of a sudden he sprang up. He had a smile on his face. He had solved the puzzle that trapped him. The last piece had snapped into place. The woman's face and his love for her filled the aura. She shook her head. I pity the person who ever puts a finger between those two. They will lose the finger, maybe the hand, and maybe the whole arm before they have the time to think to pull it back.
Her name is Kaelin,
Zed said with a little smile.
And then what happened?
Jebra crossed her arms across her abdomen. Then the vision started. I saw him killing a man, but I couldn't tell how. Not with blood, but killing him just the same. And then I saw the man he was going to kill, Darken Rahl. And then I saw that it was his father, but he didn't know it. That was when I knew who he was, the son of Darken Rahl, the soon-to-be new Master Rahl. The aura was flashing in terrible conflicts, commoner to king. Zed put a comforting hand to her shoulder.
Darken Rahl wanted to rule the world with a frightful magic. By stopping him, Richard saved a great many from torture or death. Even though killing is terrible, by doing so he has saved the lives of many more. Surely you would not be frightened of Richard because of that?
She shook her head. No, it was by what came next. The two moored Sith stood because he was going to leave a devotion. One raised her Aegil, threatening him. I was surprised to see he wore one at his neck, red, just like theirs. He held it out in his fist. He told them that if they didn't let him pass, he would kill them. The aura of violence around him took my breath away. He wanted them to try. They sensed it and let him pass. As he turned to leave, That was when I saw the other visions. She put a hand to her heart as tears ran down her cheeks. Zed, my visions are not always clear. Sometimes I don't know what they mean. Once I saw a farmer's vision. Birds were pecking at the stomachs of him and his family. I didn't know what it meant. It turned out that a flock of blackbirds came and ate the seed he had just planted. He was able to replant and guard the field, but he and his family could have starved if he hadn't. She wiped her fingers at the tears on her cheeks. Sometimes I can't tell what the visions mean, or if they will turn out to be true. Not all of that kind do. She fussed with her hair. But sometimes they come to pass exactly as I see them. I can tell when they are true and will happen without a doubt. Zed patted her shoulder.
I understand, Jebra. Visions are a form of prophecy, and I know how confusing prophecy can be. What kind of vision did you see from Richard? The confusing kind, or the ones that are clear?
She shared a deep gaze with his eyes. I saw every kind. I saw every kind of vision I have ever had, from the confusing to clear, from the possible to the certain. They came in a rush. They have never done that before. Mostly I only have a single vision, and I either know what it means and that it is true, or I don't understand it and can't tell if it will come to pass. The visions from this man came in a torrent. They rushed past like wind-driven rain, but every one was pain and hurt and danger. The ones that stood out the hardest, and I knew to be true, were the worst. One was of something around his neck. I couldn't tell what, but it was something that will cause him great pain and take him from the woman. Kaelin, you said her name was. Take him from everyone he loves. Lock him away.
Richard was captured by a Mord Sith and tortured by her. Perhaps that is what you saw,
Zed offered. Jebra shook her head vehemently. It wasn't what was. It was what will be. And not the pain of a Mord Sith. Different. I am sure of it. Zed nodded in thought.
What else?
I saw him in an hourglass. He was on his knees in the bottom half, crying in anguish, the sand falling all around him, but not a grain touching him. The gravestones of all those he loved were in the top half, where he couldn't reach them against the fall of the sand. I saw a knife at his heart, a killing knife, held in his own shaking hands. Before I could see what would happen, another vision came. They are not always in order of events. He was in his fine red coat, the one with gold buttons and brocade trim. He was face down, a knife in his back. He was dead, but at the same time, he wasn't. His own hands reached down to roll him over, but before I saw his dead face, another vision came. It was the worst, the strongest. The tears welled up again, and she began to sob softly. Zed squeezed her shoulder to encourage her to go on. I saw his flesh burning. She wiped at the tears and rocked back and forth a little as she cried. He was screaming. I could even smell the burning skin. Then whatever was burning him, I couldn't tell what it was. When it pulled back, he was unconscious, and there was a mark upon him, a mark burned into him. Zed worked his tongue in his mouth, trying to wet it.
Could you see what the mark was?
No, not what it looked like. But I knew what it was, as surely as I know the sun when I see it. It was the mark of the dead, a mark of the keeper of the underworld. The keeper had marked him to be his own. Zed worked to steady his breathing, his trembling hands.
Were there more visions?
Yes, but not as strong, and I didn't understand them. They rushed by so fast I couldn't grasp their form, only their pain. Then he was gone. While the Mord Sith were turned, watching him go, I ran back to my room and locked myself in. I lay on the bed for hours, crying uncontrollably with the hurt of what I had seen. The Lady Ordeth banged at my door, wanting me, but I called to her that I was sick, and she finally went away in a huff. I cried until my insides were jelly. I saw virtue in that man, and I wept in fear of the evil I saw snatching for him. Though the visions were all different, they were the same. They all had the same feel. Danger. Danger presses in around that man as tightly as water presses around a fish. She regained some of her composure as Zed sat silently watching her. That is why I will not work for him. The good spirits protect me. I don't want anything to do with the danger around that man, with the underworld.
Maybe you could help him with your talent. Help him to avoid the danger. That is what I was hoping anyway, Zed said in a quiet voice.
Jebra dabbed her cheeks dry with the back of her sleeve. Not for all the Duke's gold and power would I want to be in Lord Ral's wake. I am no coward, but I am no heroine in a song, and no fool either. I did not wish my guts put back to have them ripped out again, and this time my soul with them. Zed quietly watched her sniffling herself back under control, putting the frightening visions away. She took a deep breath and sighed. Her blue eyes finally looked to his.
Richard is my grandson, he said simply.
Her eyes winced shut. Oh, good spirits, forgive me. Her hand covered her mouth for a long moment. Then her eyes came open, her eyebrows wrinkled together in horror. Zed, I'm so sorry for telling you what I saw. Forgive me. Had I known, I never would have told you. Her hands trembled. Forgive me. Oh, please forgive me.
The truth is the truth. I am not one who would shut a door in your face for seeing it. Jebra, I am a wizard. I already know of the danger he is in. That is why I asked you to help. The veil to the underworld is torn. That thing that ripped you open escaped into the world of the living through the tear. If the veil tears enough, the keeper will escape. Richard has done things that the prophecies say mark him as maybe the only one able to close the tear.
He lifted the purse of gold and slowly settled it in her lap, her eyes following it down. He withdrew his empty hand. Her gaze stayed on the purse, as if it were a beast that might bite. Would it be very dangerous? She asked, at last, in a weak voice. Zed smiled when her eyes came up.
No more dangerous than going for an afternoon stroll in a fortress palace.
With a reflex jerk, her hand clutched her abdomen where the wound had been. Her eyes rose to look off down the wide, resplendent halls as if seeking escape or maybe fearing an attack. Without looking to him, she spoke. My grandmother was a seer, and my only guide. She told me once that the visions would bring me a lifetime of hurt, and there was nothing I would ever be able to do to stop them. She said that if ever I was presented with the opportunity to use the visions for good, to take the chance, and it would make up for some of the burden. That was the day she put her stone in my hand. Jebra lifted the purse and set it back in Zed's lap. I will not do it for all the gold in Dahara, but I will do it for you. Zed smiled and patted her cheek.
Thank you, child.
He put the gold back in her lap, the coins making a muffled clink.
You will be needing this. You will have expenses. What is left is yours. That is the way I wish it.
She nodded resignedly. What must I do?
Well, first we must both get a good night's sleep. You will need to rest for a few days to regain your strength. And then you have some traveling to do, Lady Bevenvier.
He smiled at the way one of her eyebrows lifted.
We are both very tired right now. Tomorrow, after I have rested, I must be off on important business. Before I leave, I will come to you and we will talk more of this. But starting right now, I would ask you not to wear the stone where it can be seen. No good can come of declaring your talent to eyes in the shadows.
So, my new employer shall use me covertly, too? Not the most honorable of things.
The ones who would recognize you now are not vying for gold. They serve the keeper. They want much more than gold. If they discover you, you will wish I had not saved you today.
She winced before finally nodding. Chapter 4. Zed stood with the aid of a hand to his knee. He helped Jebra up. As he expected, she was unable to stand without leaning heavily on him. She apologized for the burden. He made her smile by telling her he would use any excuse to have his arm around the waist of a pretty maiden. People were starting to go back to their business, engaged in hushed conversation as their eyes darted about the suddenly not-so-safe palace. Those hurt had been helped away and the dead carried off. Maidservants in heavy skirts worked tearfully at the task of cleaning up the blood, sloshing mops in buckets of reddening water. Soldiers of the first file were spread out everywhere. Zed motioned to Commander Trimac across the hall. "Anyway, I shall be glad to be away from this place," Jebra said. "I have seen auras here that make me sweat in my sleep." As the officer started toward them, Zed asked,
"Do you see anything of this man coming toward us?"
She studied him a moment as he strode toward them, checking the placement of his men. "A faint aura. Duty." She frowned as she stared. It has always been a burden for him. He is daring to hope that maybe he will now find pride in it. Does that help you any? Zed smiled a little.
"Yes, it does. Any visions?"
"No, just the faint aura." The wizard nodded in thought, then brightened.
"By the way, why has a woman as lovely as you not found herself a husband?"
She gave him a sidelong glance. 3 have asked. As each was on bended knee before me, I saw a vision of them lying with another woman." Zed grinned.
"Did they ask why you said no?"
"I didn't say no. I only slapped them so hard it made their heads ring like a bell." Zed laughed until she was caught up in it. Page 36. Trimac came at last to a halt before them.
"Commander General Trimac, may I introduce the Lady Bevenvier?"
Trimac gave a smart bow.
"As are you, as am I, this lady is one who is at the task of keeping harm from getting a glance at Lord Rall. I would like her to have a heavy guard at all times while she is in the palace. Lord Rall needs her help, and I don't want her life risked again as it was today."
"While she is in the palace, she will be as safe as a babe in her mother's arms. By my honor."
He turned and gave a coded tap to his shoulder. A good 24 men of the first file came at a dead run, freezing to a halt at attention, not even breathing hard.
"This is the Lady Bevenvier. Every one of your lives before hers."
With a sharp snap, every fist came to an armored heart as one. 2 of them took Jebra's weight from Zed. She kept one hand tightly closed around the stone. The purse of gold bulged in a pocket of her long green skirt. It was covered most of the way down with dried blood. Zed addressed the men holding her up.
"She will need suitable quarters and meals brought in. Please see to it she is not disturbed by anyone but me."
He looked at her tired blue eyes and gently touched her arm.
"Rest well, child. I will visit you in the morning."
She smiled weakly. "Thank you, Zed." As the soldiers helped her away, the wizard turned his attention to Trimac.
"There is a woman staying in the palace, a Lady Ordith Kondatith de Dakidvich. Lord Rall is going to have enough trouble without her kind around. I want her out of here before the day is finished. If she refuses to leave, offer her the choice of a carriage or a noose."
Trimac grinned wickedly.
"I will see to it personally."
"If there are any others you know of about the palace who are of her temperament, feel free to make them the same offer. New rule brings change."
Zed couldn't see auras, but he was sure that if Jebra had been standing there, she would have seen Trimac's brighten.
"Some are uncomfortable with change, Wizard Zorander."
The man had spoken more than his simple words.
"Are there any above you in command in the palace, other than Lord Rall?"
Trimac clasped his hands behind his back as his eyes swept the hall.
"There is one named Demin Nass, commander of the Quads, who gave orders to all but Darken Rall."
Zed let out a heavy breath at that memory.
"He is dead."
Trimac nodded with what might have been relief.
"Below the palace, quartered in the chambers of the plateau, there are perhaps 30,000 men of the army. Their generals outrank me in the field, but in the palace the word of the commander-general of the first file is law. Some of them I know will welcome the change, some will not."
Richard is going to have a difficult enough time being the magic against magic, underworld magic, without troubles from steel. You have a free hand, Commander, to do as you see fit to protect him. Err on the side of duty.
Trimac grunted acknowledgement, then went on. The People's Palace, one roof though it may be, is a city. Thousands live here. Merchants and supplies, trains of wagons to lone peddlers come and go in an endless stream in all directions, except to the east, across the Azrith Plains. The roads in are the arteries that feed the heart of Dehara, the People's Palace. The inside of the plateau is chambered with twice the number of rooms of the palace above ground. As with any city of this size, the motives of the multitudes coming here are beyond their ability to judge with absolute certainty. I will have the great inner doors closed and seal off the palace above ground. It is something that has not been done in a few hundred years, and it will cause worry among the people of Dehara, but I would risk the worried talk. The only way to the palace itself, if not through the inside entrances, is up the cliff road on the east side. I will keep the bridge up. That still leaves us with thousands in the palace proper. Any of them could have designs not to our liking. Worse, there are thousands of battle-tested soldiers in the belly of the palace, many led by men I would not want getting a glance at Lord Rahl. I have a feeling the new Lord Rahl is not the kind of Rahl they are used to dealing with, and they are not going to like the change. Dehara is a vast empire, the supply routes long. Perhaps it is time some of these divisions were sent out to see to the safety of these routes, especially the ones to the far south near the wilds, where I have heard rumor there is unrest and trouble. And perhaps from the ranks of the ones I trust, the size of the first file could be increased threefold. Zed studied Trimac's face as the man continued to scan the hall.
I am no soldier, but your ideas make sense. The palace must be made as secure as possible. How you do it is up to you.
I will give you a list, then, in the morning of the generals to be trusted and those to worry about.
Why would I need such a list?
Trimac's intense gaze was steady. Because orders such as these must come from one with the gift. Zed shook his head, muttering.
Wizards should not be ruling people. It's not right.
It is the way in Dehara. Magic and steel. I want to protect Lord Rahl. This is what I think needs to be done. Zed stared off into the distance, feeling the ache of exhaustion in his bones.
Do you know, Trimac, that I have fought and killed wizards who wanted to take it upon themselves to rule?
When an answer didn't come, Zed turned back to the officer. Trimac was studying him. Given the choice, Wizard Zorander, I would choose to serve one who bears command as a burden to one who wears the mantle as a right. Zed sighed and nodded.
In the morning, then. There is one other matter, the most important of all. I want the Garden of Life guarded. That is where the Skreeling first attacked. I don't know if there will be more. There is a door up there that will have to be fixed. Put a ring of steel around the garden. Enough men that they have room only to swing an axe. No one at all, is to be allowed to go in except myself or Richard, or by our order. Anyone attempting to go into that room is to be viewed as harm, trying to get a look at Lord Rahl. Even one who tells you he is there only to pull weeds. And you can bet your mother's honor that anything trying to get out is harm trying to have more than a look.
Trimac clapped his fist to his armored chest. To the last man, Wizard Zorander.
Good. Lord Rahl may need what's in that room. I don't dare to move those things for the time being. They are extremely dangerous. Take very seriously the guarding of that room, Commander. More Skreelings could come, or worse.
How soon?
I would not have thought we would have seen the first for a year or more, at least months. That the Keeper could have loosed one of his assassins so soon is a great worry. I don't know who it was sent for. It's possible it was simply sent to kill whoever was around. The keeper needs no reason to kill. I must leave the palace tomorrow to learn what I can before we are surprised again."
Trimac pondered this with troubled eyes. "Do you know when Lord Ral will return?" Zed shook his head.
"No. I thought I was going to have time to teach him some of what he must know. But now I must send for him at once to meet me in Aidendrill and see if we can discover what must be done. He is in great danger and knows nothing of it. Events have outpaced me. I have no idea what the Keeper is going to do next. But I now fear how deep his tendrils may be. That they were already around Darkenrall even before the veil was torn means I have already been an ignorant fool in this business. If Richard should happen to return unexpectedly, or if anything happens to me, help him. He sees himself as a woods guide, not the Lord Ral. He will be distrustful. Tell him I said to trust you."
"If he is distrustful, how shall I convince him to trust me?" Zed smiled.
"Tell him I said it is the truth, the toasted toad's truth."
Trimac's eyes widened with incredulity. "You wish the Commander-General of the First File to say such a childish thing to the Lord Ral?" Zed straightened his face and cleared his throat.
"It's a code, Commander. He will understand it."
Trimac nodded, but looked skeptical. "I had better see to the Garden of Life and the rest of it. No disrespect intended, but you look like you could use some rest." He tilted his head toward where the army of maidservants were still cleaning blood off the marble floor. "All the healing you did looks to have tired you."
"It did. Thank you, Commander Trimac. I will take your advice."
Trimac's fist snapped to his heart, the salute softened by the hint of a smile. He began to turn, but hesitated. His intense blue eyes looked back to the wizard. "May I say, Wizard Zorander, that it's a pleasure to at last have one with the gift in the palace who is more concerned with putting people's guts back inside than with spilling them out. I've never seen the like of it." Zed didn't smile. His voice was quiet.
"I am sorry, Commander, that I could do nothing for that lad."
Trimac gave a sorrowful nod. "I know that to be the truth, Wizard Zorander. The toasted toad's truth." Zed watched the commander stride across the hall, drawing armored men to him like a huge magnet. The wizard brought his hand up, staring at the gold chain looped over his stick-like fingers. He gave a pained sigh. Wizard business. Using people. And now for the worst of it. He brought the black, tear-shaped stone from a pocket deep in his robes. The spirits be cursed, he thought, for the things a wizard must do. He held the mounting where the blue stone had been and pressed the point of the smooth black stone to it. Elemental power flowed from the fingers of each hand, joining in the middle, welding the stone to the mount. Hoping he was wrong, Zed brought forth a painful memory of his long-dead wife. With the way Jebra's mind had shredded his barriers, it wasn't difficult. When a tear ran over his cheek, he wet his thumb in it and shut the memory away with the greatest of effort. He smiled a little at the irony that wizards had to use even themselves, and that the horrible memory at least brought with it one with a little pleasure to balance it. Holding the black stone in the palm of one hand, he buffed its surface with the tear-dampened thumb. The stone turned a clear amber as he rubbed it with his thumb. His heart sank a little. There was no doubt now as to what it was. Resigned to what must be done, Zed wove a wizard's web around the stone. The spell would work to hide the true nature of the stone from everyone except Richard. More important, the web would draw Richard's attention to the stone. If he ever saw it, the attraction would be planted firmly in his mind. He glanced over at Chase, who was stretched out on his back on a marble bench across the hall. One foot was planted on the floor, and Rachel was sitting on the ground, an arm wrapped around his calf, her head against his knee. His other foot was on the bench. A bandaged forearm rested across his forehead. Zed sighed and started across the polished marble floor. He wondered for a moment what the boundary warden was supposed to guard, now that the boundary was gone. He stopped, standing over the two. Without removing his forearm from his eyes, Chase spoke.
Zed, my old friend, if you ever again have some ruthless, strong-armed witch of a healer pour a concoction that tastes that spirits be cursed foul down my gullet, I'll twist your head around so you have to walk backward to see where you're going.
Zed grinned. Now he knew he had picked the right woman for the job. "Did the medicine taste really awful, Chase?" Rachel asked. He lifted his arm a little, letting it hover over his eyes as he looked down at her.
If you call me Chase again, you may find out.
"Yes, Father," she grinned. "I'm sorry she made you drink that awful medicine." Her face turned to a pout. "But it scares me something fierce to see blood on you." He grunted. She peered at him. "Maybe the next time, if you take your sword out when I tell you to, you wouldn't get blood on you and have to drink awful medicine." Zed marveled at the childlike innocence of the perfectly delivered stinging rebuke. Chase held his head up a little off the bench, with his arm frozen in the air several inches above his eyes. As he glowered at the little girl, Zed had never seen a man struggle so mightily to keep from laughing. Rachel's nose wrinkled up, and she giggled at the strained face he was making.
"May the good spirits be mercifully kind to your future husband," Chase said, "and at least grant him a few years' peace until you lay your eyes on the poor doomed fool."
She frowned. "What does that mean?" Chase swung his leg down and sat up. He scooped her up and plopped her down on his knee.
"I'll tell you what it means. It means that there's a new rule, and this one you better not break."
"No, Father, I won't. What is it?"
"From now on," he said with a scowl, his face close to hers, "if you need to tell me something important and I don't listen to you, you are to kick me. Hard as you can. And you just go on kicking me until I listen. Got it?"
She smiled. "Yes, Father."
"I'm not joking. I mean it."
She nodded earnestly. "I promise, Chase." The big man rolled his eyes and swept her to his chest with one arm, holding her to him the way she held her doll to herself. Zed swallowed back the lump in his throat. At that moment, he didn't like himself very much, and he liked the alternatives a lot less. The wizard fell to one knee before her. The dried blood made his robes stiff at his knees.
"Rachel, I must ask you to do something for me."
She nodded. "What is it, Zed?" He brought his arm up, the gold chain hanging from his fingers. The stone swung back and forth under his hand.
"This belongs to someone else. Would you wear it for now? Keep it safe. Someday, Richard may come and get it from you to take it where it belongs. But I don't know when that will be."
Chase's fierce, hawkish eyes looked like what Zed imagined a mouse must see an instant before the end. "It's very pretty, Zed. I never wore such a pretty thing."
"It's also very important. As important as the box that Wizard Giller gave you to look after."
"But Darkenrall is dead. You said so. He can't hurt us anymore."
"I know, child, but this is still important. You did such a good and brave job with the box that I think you would be the best one to wear this necklace until the one it belongs to comes for it. You must wear it always until then. Don't let anyone else even try it on for play. This is not something to play with."
Her expression turned serious at the mention of the box. "I'll take good care of it, Zed, if you say it's important."
"Zed,"
Chase hissed as he pulled Rachel's head to himself, cupping his hand over her ear so she couldn't hear.
"What do you think you're doing? Is that what I think it is?"
Zed gave him a forbidding look.
"I'm trying to keep all the children of the world from having very bad nightmares for eternity."
Chase gritted his teeth.
"Zed, I don't want..."
Zed cut him off.
"Chase, how long have you known me?"
Chase didn't answer. He only glared.
"In all the time you've known me, have you ever known me to bring harm to another, especially a child? Have you ever known me to put another at risk for anything foolish?"
"No,"
Chase said in a voice like grating stone.
"And I don't want to see you start now."
Zed kept his own voice firm.
"You will have to trust that I know what I'm doing.
His eyes flicked to where the Skreeling had killed the people.
What has happened today doesn't even begin to touch what is about to happen. If the veil isn't closed, the suffering and death will be beyond your comprehension. I'm doing what I must as a wizard. As a wizard, I recognize this little one just as Gilla recognized her. She is a ripple in the pond. She is destined to do important things. When we were in the tomb of Panis Ral earlier, checking to see that they were walling it in properly, I studied some of the runes on the walls. They weren't all melted yet. They were in High Daharan, and I don't understand much of it, but I understood enough. They were instructions on going to the underworld. You know the stone table in the Garden of Life? It's a sacrificial altar. Darkenral used it to go to the underworld, to travel under the boundaries.
But he's dead. What does...
He killed children and offered their unsoiled souls as a gift to the keeper of the underworld to gain himself passage. Do you understand what I'm saying? He made pacts with the keeper. That means the keeper has been using people in this world. Where he has used one, he has surely used more. And now the veil is torn. That a Skreeling was here proves it beyond question. Many of the oldest prophecies, I believe, are about what's beginning to happen now and about Richard. Whoever wrote them was intending to send him help across time. I believe they are meant to aid him in the fight against the Keeper. But much has happened in the last few thousand years to muddy those words. I fear that it is the Keeper's patient work that has obfuscated the meaning of the prophecies. He has no more important skill than patience. He has an eternity of it. He has probably been sending careful tendrils into this world to influence people, wizards like Darkenral, to do his bidding. The fact that we need the prophecies so much right now, and that there are no wizards left who understand them, can't be a coincidence. I have no idea where the Keeper's eyes lurk or what he intends next.
Chase's eyes still had fire in them, but it was different from the kind they held before.
Tell me how to help. What would you like me to do?
Zed smiled sadly and patted the big man's shoulder.
I would like you to teach this child to be like you. I know she is smart. Bring it out in her. Make her your student. Teach her how to use every weapon you know. Teach her to be strong and quick.
Chase sighed and gave a nod.
Such a little warrior.
In the morning, I must leave to get Addie and take her to Aidendrill. I would like you to go to the Mud People. Ride hard, fast as you can go. Richard and Kaelin and Sidon will be with the dragon tonight, and tomorrow she will take them there. It will take you weeks to reach him. We can't afford to waste any time. Tell Richard and Kaelin to come to me in Aidendrill at once. Tell them of the danger as I have told you. Then maybe you should take this child to safety, if there is any such thing.
Isn't there anything else I can do?
The most important thing is to get to Richard. I've been a fool for thinking we would have time. I never should have let him out of my sight.
Zed rubbed his chin a moment in thought.
Maybe you could tell him I am his grandfather, and that Darkenral was his father. Maybe that will give his anger time to cool before he reaches me.
Zed lifted an eyebrow and smiled.
Do you know what the Mud People call him? They call him Richard with the temper. Imagine that. Richard of all people. He is one of the gentlest people I've ever known. But I fear the sword of truth has brought out his other side.
Chase flashed a rare, reassuring look.
He won't be angry to learn you are his grandfather. He loves you.
Zed sighed.
Maybe so, but I don't think he will be pleased to know who his father really is, and that I hid that knowledge from him. George Cypher raised him, and they loved each other deeply.
That's the truth. And this doesn't change it.
Zed nodded. He held the necklace up.
Will you trust me?
Chase appraised the wizard for a moment, then sat Rachel up straight on his knee.
Let me latch the clasp for you.
After Chase hooked it around her neck, Rachel picked up the amber stone in her small hands, bending her face down to see it.
I'll take good care of it for you, Zed.
The wizard ruffled her hair.
I'm sure you will.
He put a finger to each side of her forehead, letting the magic flow into her, and gave her the thought of how important the necklace was, that she was not to talk to people about it or where she got it, and that she must protect it as she had the box of Orden. He removed his fingers, and she opened her eyes and smiled. Chase picked her up with a hand on each side of her waist and set her down to stand on the bench next to him. He searched through the arsenal of knives at his waist and found the strap for the smallest. He untied the leather thong and pulled the sheathed blade free. He held it up in front of her face.
Since you are my daughter now, you will wear a knife, just like me. But I don't want you taking it out until I teach you about it. You could cut yourself badly. I will teach you how to use it in a safe manner. I'm going to teach you how to protect yourself, so you will be safe. All right?
Rachel beamed.
You'll teach me to be like you? I would like that ever so much, Chase.
Chase grunted as he tied the leather strap at her waist.
I don't know how good I'll be at teaching you. Seems I can't even teach you to call me father.
She smiled shyly.
Chase and father mean the same thing to me.
Chase shook his head, a resigned grin on his face. Zed came to his feet and straightened his robes.
Chase, if you need anything, Commander General Tremak will see to it. Take as many men as you would like.
I wouldn't like any. I'm in a hurry. I don't need the extra baggage to tend. And besides, I think a man and his daughter would draw less attention. Isn't that the whole idea?
He glanced pointedly at the stone around Rachel's neck. Zed smiled, appreciating the boundary warden's sharp mind. Those two were going to make quite a pair.
I will travel with you until I reach the route toward Addy. I must do some things in the morning, and then we can be on our way.
Good. You look like you could use some rest before we start out.
I think you're right.
Zed suddenly realized why he was so tired. He had thought it was because he hadn't slept in days, but that wasn't it. It was because they had struggled for months to stop Darken Rahl, and just when he thought it was over, that they had finally won, he now knew it had only begun. And this wasn't just a dangerous wizard they were fighting. It was the keeper of the underworld. With Darken Rahl, he had known most of the rules, how the boxes of Orden worked, how much time they'd had. He knew next to nothing now. The keeper could win in the next 5 minutes. Zed felt hopelessly ignorant. He sighed inwardly. He guessed he knew some things. He would just have to build on that knowledge.
By the way, Chase said as he straightened the knife at Rachel's waist, one of the other healers, Kelly, she said her name was, she gave me a message for you.
He leaned back and fished around in his pocket with 2 big fingers, bringing out a small piece of paper. He handed it to the wizard.
What's this?
The paper said, West Rim, North Highland Way, 3rd Tier. Chase pointed at the paper as Zed held it out, reading it.
She said that is where you could find her. She said to tell you that she thought you needed rest, and that if you would come to her, she would make you a Stenadine tea, and that she would brew it weak, so you would sleep well. Does that make any sense to you?
Zed smiled just a little to himself as he crumpled the note in his fist.
A bit.
He tapped his lower lip in thought.
Get yourself some rest. If you think the pain of the wounds will keep you from sleeping, I could have one of the healers brew you up some...
Chase held a hand up.
No, I'll sleep fine.
Very well.
He patted Rachel's arm and Chase's shoulder and started off. A thought came to him, and he turned back.
Have you ever seen Richard wearing a red coat? A red coat with gold buttons and brocade?
Chase gave a snort of a laugh.
Richard? Zed, you half-raised him. You should know better than I that Richard doesn't have a red coat like that. He has a feast day coat that's brown. Richard is a woods guide. He favors earth colors. I've never even seen him wear a red shirt. Why?
Zed ignored the question.
When you see him, tell him I said not to wear a red coat.
He shook a finger at Chase.
Ever. It's very important. Don't forget, no red coat.
Chase nodded.
Done.
He knew when not to press the old man. Zed gave Rachel a smile and a quick hug before starting off down the hall. He wondered idly if he could remember where a dining hall was. It had to be almost past dinner time. A thought occurred to him. He didn't know where he was going. He hadn't done anything about finding himself a place to sleep. Well, no matter, he thought. The palace had guest rooms. He had told Chase about them. He could go there, too. He unfolded the crumpled piece of paper in his hand and looked at it. A distinguished man with a neatly trimmed gray beard and dressed in official gold robes was walking past. Zed snagged him gently.
Excuse me, but could you tell me where...
He looked at the paper.
Where West Rim, North Highland Way, 3rd tier is located?
The bearded man gave a polite bow of his head.
Of course, sir. Those are the healer's quarters. It is not far. Let me guide you part way there and give you direction for the rest of it.
Zed broke into a smile. He suddenly didn't feel quite so tired.
Thank you. That is very kind of you.
Chapter 5. As Sister Margaret turned the corner at the top of the stone steps, an old maidservant carrying a mop and bucket saw her and fell to her knees. The sister paused momentarily to touch the top of the old woman's bowed head. The Creator's blessing on his child. The woman looked up, her face wrinkling into a warm, toothless smile.
Thanks be to you, sister, and blessings to you in his work.
Margaret smiled back and watched as the old woman lugged her heavy bucket on down the hall. Poor woman, she thought, having to work in the middle of the night. But then here she was herself, up and about in the middle of the night. The shoulder of her dress pulled uncomfortably. She looked down and saw that in her haste she had misaligned the top 3 buttons. She redid them before pushing open the heavy oak door out into the darkness. A pacing guard saw her and came at a run. She held the book over her mouth to hide her yawn. He lurched to a halt. "Sister, where's the prelate? He's been yelling for her. Runs shivers up my spine, it does. Where is she?" Sister Margaret scowled at the guard until he remembered his manners and dropped a quick bow. When he came back up, she started off down the rampart with the man at her heels. "The prelate does not come simply because the prophet roars. But he called out for her specifically." She stopped and clasped her hand over the one holding the book. "And would you like to be the one to bang on the prelate's bedchamber door in the middle of the night and wake her simply because the prophet shouts for it?" His face paled in the moonlight. "No, sister. It is enough that a sister must be dragged out of bed for his nonsense." "But you don't know what he's been saying, sister. He's been yelling that—" "Enough," she cautioned in a low tone. "Need I remind you that if a word he says ever touches your tongue, you will lose your head?" His hand went to his throat. "No, sister. I would never speak a word of it. Except to a sister. Not even to a sister. It must never touch your tongue." "Forgive me, sister." His tone turned apologetic. "It's just that I've never heard him cry out so before. I've never heard his voice except to call for a sister. The things he said alarmed me. I have never heard him speak such things. He has contrived to get his voice through our shields. It has happened before. He manages it sometimes. That is why his guards are sworn on an oath never to repeat anything they should happen to hear. Whatever you heard, you had best forget it before this conversation is over, unless you want us to help you forget." He shook his head, too terrified to speak. She didn't like frightening the man, but they couldn't have him wagging his tongue over a mug of ale with his fellows. Prophecies were not for the common mind to know. She laid a gentle hand on his shoulder. "What is your name?" "I am Swordsman Kevin Andelmere, sister." "If you will give me your word, Swordsman Andelmere, that you can hold your tongue about whatever you heard, to your grave, I will see about having you reassigned. You are obviously not cut out for this duty." He dropped to a knee. "Praise be to you, sister.
I'd rather face 100 heathens from the wilds than have to hear the voice of the prophet. You have my oath on my life." "So be it, then. Go back to your post. At the end of your duty, tell the captain of the guards that Sister Margaret ordered you reassigned." She touched his head. The Creator's blessing on his child.
Thank you for your kindness, sister.
She walked on, across the rampart to the small colonnade at the end, down the winding stairs, and into the torchlit hall before the door to the prophet's apartments. 2 guards with spears flanked the door. They bowed together. "I hear the prophet has been speaking out through the shield." Cold, dark eyes looked back at her.
"Really? I haven't heard a thing." He spoke to the other guard while holding the sister's gaze. "You hear anything?"
The other guard leaned his weight on his spear and turned his head as he spat. He wiped his chin with the back of his hand.
"Not a thing. Been quiet as a grave."
"That boy upstairs been wagging his tongue?" the first asked. "It has been a long time since the prophet found a way to get anything other than a call for a sister through our shields. He has never heard the prophet speak before, that's all."
"You want we should make it so's he don't hear nothing again? Or speak it?"
"That won't be necessary. I have his oath, and have ordered him reassigned."
"Oath." The man made a sour face at the word. "An oath is nothing more than babbled words. A blade's oath is truer."
"Really? Am I to assume that your oath of silence is nothing more than babbled words, too? Should we see to your silence, then, in a truer way?" Sister Margaret held his dark gaze until it at last broke with a downward glance.
"No, sister. My oath is true enough." She nodded.
"Has anyone else been about to hear him yelling?"
"No, sister. As soon as he started in calling for the prelate, we checked the area. To be sure, there were none of the staff or anyone else about. When we found everything was clear, I posted guards at all the far entrances and sent for a sister. He's never called for the prelate before, only a sister. I thought it should be up to a sister, not me, to decide if the prelate was to be awakened in the middle of the night."
"Good thinking."
"Now that you're here, sister, we should be off to check the others." His expression darkened again, to make sure no one heard anything. She nodded.
"And you had better hope Swordsman Andelmir is careful and doesn't fall off a wall and break his neck, or I will come looking for him."
He gave an annoyed grunt.
"But if you hear him repeat so much as a single word of what he heard tonight, you find a sister before you stop to take another breath." Through the door and halfway down the inner hall, she stopped and felt the shields. She held the book to her breast in both arms as she concentrated, searching for the breach. She smiled when she found it. A tiny twist in the weave. He had probably been picking at it for years. She closed her eyes and wove the breach together, binding it with a barb of power that would thwart him if he tried the same thing again. She was ruefully impressed by his ingenuity and his persistence. Well, she sighed to herself, what else had he to do? Inside his spacious apartments, the lamps were lit, tapestries hung on one of the walls, and the floors were generously covered with the local colorful blue and yellow carpets. The bookshelves were half empty. Books that belonged on them lay open everywhere, some on the chairs and couches, some face down on pillows on the floor, and some stacked in disheveled piles next to his favorite chair beside the cold hearth. Sister Margaret went to the elegant, polished rosewood writing table to the side of the room. She sat at the padded chair and, opening the book on the desktop, flipped through it until she came to a clean page at the end of the writing. She didn't see the prophet anywhere. He was probably in the garden. The double doors to the small garden were open, letting in a gentle breath of warm air. From a drawer in the desk, she took an ink bottle, pen, and a small sprinkle box of fine sand, setting them beside the open book of prophecies. When she looked up, he was standing in the half-light in the doorway to the garden, watching her. He was in black robes, with the hood drawn up. He stood motionless, his hands in the sleeves of the opposite arms. He filled the doorway not just with his size, but with his presence. She wiggled the stopper from the ink bottle. "Good evening, Nathan." He took 3 strong, slow strides out of the shadows and into the lamplight, pushing back the black hood to uncover his full head of long, straight white hair that touched his broad shoulders. The top of the metal collar just barely showed at the neck of his robes. The muscles in his strong, clean-shaven jaw tightened. White eyebrows hooded his deep, dark azure eyes. He was a ruggedly handsome man, despite being the oldest man she had ever known. And he was quite mad. Or he was quite clever and wanted everyone to think he was mad. She wasn't sure which was true. No one was. Either way, he was probably the most dangerous man alive.
"Where is the prelate?"
he asked in a deep, menacing voice. She picked up the pen. "It is the middle of the night, Nathan. We are not going to wake the prelate simply because you throw a fit demanding she come. Any sister can write down a prophecy. Why don't you sit down and we can begin?" He came to the desk opposite her, towering over her.
"Don't test me, Sister Margaret. This is important."
She glowered up at him. "And don't you test me, Nathan. Need I remind you that you will lose? Now that you have gotten me out of bed in the middle of the night, let's get this over with so I may return to it and try to salvage a part of a night's sleep."
"I asked for the prelate." "This is important."
"Nathan, we have yet to decipher prophecies you gave us years ago. It could not possibly make any difference if you give this one to me, and she reads it in the morning, or next week, or next year for that matter."
"I have no prophecy to give."
Her anger rose. "You have called me from my bed for company?" A broad smile spread on his lips.
"Would you object? It's a beautiful night. You are a handsome enough woman, if a little tightly wound."
He cocked his head to the side.
"No? Well, since you have come and must have a prophecy, would you like me to tell you of your death?"
"The Creator will take me when he chooses. I will leave it to him." He nodded, staring off over her head.
"Sister Margaret, would you have a woman sent to visit me? I find I am lonely of late."
"It is not the task of the sisters to procure harlots for you."
"But they have seen to a courtesan for me in the past, when I have given prophecies."
With deliberate care, she set the pen on the desk. "And the last one left before we could talk to her. She ran back, half naked and half mad. How she got through the guards, we still don't know. You promised not to speak prophecies to her. You promised, Nathan. Before we could find her, she had repeated what you had told her. It spread like a wildfire. It started a civil war. Nearly 6,000 people died because of what you told that young woman." His worried white eyebrows went up.
"Really? I never knew."
She took a deep breath and spoke in a soft voice to control her anger. "Nathan, I myself have told you this 3 times now." He looked down with sad eyes.
"I'm sorry, Margaret."
"Sister Margaret."
"Sister? You? You are far too young and attractive to be a sister. Surely you are but a novice."
She stood. "Good night, Nathan." She closed the cover on the book and started to pick it up.
"Sit down, Sister Margaret," came his voice, again full of power and menace.
"You have nothing to tell me. I am returning to my bed."
"I did not say I had nothing to tell you. I said I had no prophecy to give."
"If you have had no vision and have no prophecy, what could you possibly have to tell me?" He withdrew his hands from his sleeves and placed his knuckles on the desk, leaning close to her face.
"Sit down, or I won't tell you."
Margaret contemplated using her power, but decided that it was easier and quicker to simply make him happy and sit down. "All right, I'm sitting. What is it?" He leaned over even more, his eyes going wide. "There has been a fork in the prophecies," he whispered. She felt herself rising out of the chair. "When?" "Just today, this very day." "Then why have you called me in the middle of the night?"
"I called out as soon as it came to me."
"And why have you not waited until the morning to tell us this? There have been forks before." He slowly shook his head as he smiled. "Not like this one." She didn't relish telling the others. No one was going to be happy about this. No one but Warren, that is. He would be in a state of glee to have a piece to fit into the puzzle of the prophecies. The others, though, would not be pleased. This meant years of work. Some prophecies were if-and-then prophecies, bifurcating into several possibilities. There were prophecies that followed each branch, prophecies to foretell events of each fork, since not even the prophecies always knew which events would come to pass. Once one of these kind of prophecies came to pass and resolved which fork was to be true, and one of the alternatives took place, a prophecy had forked, as it was called. All the prophecies that followed down the path that had been voided now became false prophecies. These themselves multiplied, like the branches of a tree, clogging the sacred prophecies with confusing, contradicting, and false information. Once a fork had occurred, the prophecies they now knew to be false had to be followed as far as could be traced and pulled out. It was a formidable task. The further the event in question was from the fork, the more difficult it was to know if it was of the false fork or of the true. Worse, it was difficult to tell if two prophecies, one following another, belonged together, or if they were to happen 1,000 years apart. Sometimes the events themselves helped to decipher where it was to be placed chronologically, but only sometimes. The further in time from the fork, the more difficult was the task of relating them. The effort would take years, and even then they could be sure only of accomplishing part of it. To this day, they could not know with confidence if they were reading a true prophecy or the descendant of a false fork in the past. For this reason, some considered the prophecies unreliable at best, useless at worst. But if they now knew of a fork, and more importantly, knew the true and the false branches, they would have a valuable guide. She sank back into the chair. How important is the prophecy that forked? It is a core prophecy. There could be none more important. Decades. It wouldn't take years, it would take decades. A core prophecy touched almost everything. Her insides fluttered. This was like going blind. Until the tainted fruit of the false fork could be culled, they couldn't trust anything. She looked up into his eyes. You do know which it was that forked? He smiled proudly. I know the false fork and the true. I know what has come to pass. Well, at least there was that. She felt a ripple of excitement. If Nathan could tell her which fork was true and which was false and the nature of each branch, it would be valuable information indeed. Since the prophecies were not in chronological order, there was no way to simply follow a branch. But this would be a very good start. They would know right where to begin. Better yet, they had learned of it as it happened and not years later. You have done well, Nathan. He grinned like a child who had pleased his mother. Bring a chair close and tell me of the fork. Nathan seemed drawn up in the excitement as he pulled a chair to the side of the desk. He flounced down in it, squirming like a puppy with a stick. She hoped she wouldn't have to hurt him to get this stick out of his mouth. Nathan, can you tell me the prophecy that is forked? His eyes twinkled with mischief. Are you sure you want to know, Sister Margaret? Prophecies are dangerous. The last time I told one to a pretty lady, thousands died. You said so yourself. Nathan, please, it's late. This is very important. The mirth left his face. I don't remember the words exactly. She doubted the truth of that. When it came to prophecies, Nathan's mind saw the words as if they were written on a stone tablet. She put a reassuring hand on his arm. That is to be understood. I know it is difficult to remember every word. Tell it as best you can. Well, let's see. He looked at the ceiling as he stroked his chin with his thumb and fingertips. It is the one that says something about the one from Dahara who would shadow the world by counting shadows. That's very good, Nathan. Can you remember more? She knew he probably remembered it word for word, but he liked to be coaxed. It would be a tremendous help to me. He eyed her a moment, and then nodded. By winter's breath the counted shadows shall bloom. If the heir to Dahara's vengeance counts the shadows true, his umbra will darken the world. If he counts false, then his life is forfeit. A forked prophecy indeed. This had been the first full day of winter's season. She didn't know what the prophecy meant, but she knew of it. This one was the matter of much study and debate down in the vaults, and worry over which year this prophecy might come to pass. And which fork has the prophecy taken? His face turned grim.
The worst one.
Her fingers fumbled with a button. We are to fall under the shadow of this one from Dahara?
You should study the prophecies closer, sister. The following prophecy goes on to say, should the forces of forfeit be loosed, the world will be shadowed yet by darker lust through what has been rent. Salvation's hope then will be as slim as the white blade of the one born true.
He leaned closer and whispered,
the only one of darker lust, Sister Margaret, would be the Lord of Anarchy.
She whispered a prayer. May the Creator shelter us in his light.
His smile was mocking. The prophecy says nothing about the Creator coming to our aid, sister. If it is protection you seek, you had better follow the true fork. It is in that way he has offered you a glimmer of hope for defense from what will be.
She smoothed the folds of her dress on her lap. Nathan, I don't know what this prophecy means. We can't follow the true and false forks if we don't know what it means. You said you know those forks. Can you tell me? Can you tell me a prophecy on each fork, one that leads each way, so we may follow their path?
Vengeance under the Master will extinguish every adversary. Terror, hopelessness, and despair will reign free.
He peered at her intently with one eye.
This one leads down the false fork.
She wondered how it was possible for the true prophecy to be worse. And one of the true fork?
A close prophecy after the true fork says, of all there were, but a single one born of the magic to bring forth truth will remain alive when the shadow's threat is lifted. Therefore comes the greater darkness of the dead. For there to be a chance at life's bond, this one in white must be offered to her people to bring their joy and good cheer.
Margaret pondered these two prophecies. She didn't recall either. The first seemed simple enough to understand. They could follow the false branch for a ways anyway from this one. The second was more oblique, but seemed as if it could be deciphered with a little study. She recognized it as a prophecy about a confessor. The reference to one in white meant the mother confessor. Thank you, Nathan. This will make the false fork easier to follow. The other, the true fork, will be a little harder. But with this prophecy to lead the way, we should be able to reason it out. We will just have to look for prophecies leading away from this event. Somehow, she is to bring happiness to her people. That brought a small smile to her lips. It sounds as if maybe she is to be wed, or something of that nature. The prophet blinked at her, then threw his head back and howled. He rose to his feet, roaring in laughter until he coughed and choked. He turned back to her, his face red.
You pompous fools! The way you sisters strut around as if what you do is meaningful, as if you even knew what you were doing. You remind me of a yard of chickens cackling to one another as if they thought they understood higher mathematics. I cast the grain of prophecy at your feet, and you cluck and scratch at the dirt and then peck at gravel.
For the first time since she became a sister, she felt small and ignorant. Nathan, that will be quite enough.
Idiots, he hissed.
He lurched toward her so quickly it frightened her. Before she knew it, she had released a bolt of power. It dropped him to his knees. He clutched at his chest as he gasped. Margaret recalled her power almost instantly, sorry she had reacted in this manner, out of fear. I apologize, Nathan. You frightened me. Are you all right? He grasped the chair back, drawing himself up into it as he gasped. He nodded. She sat still, ill at ease, waiting for him to recover. A grim smile spread on his lips.
Frightened you, did I? Would you like to be really frightened? Would you like me to show you a prophecy? Not tell you the words, but show it to you. Show it to you the way it was meant to be passed on. I have never shown a sister before. You all study them and think you can decipher their meaning from the words, but you don't understand. That is not the true way they work.
She leaned forward. What do you mean that is not the way they work? they are meant to foretell, and that is what they do. He shook his head.
Only partly. They are passed on by ones with the gift, ones like me, prophets. They are intended to be read and understood through the gift, by ones with the gift, ones like me, not to be picked over by the likes of your power.
As he straightened himself, pulling the aura of authority around himself again, she studied his face. She had never heard of such a thing. She wasn't sure if he was telling the truth or just talking out of anger. But if it was the truth... Nathan, anything you could tell me or show me would be a great help. We are all struggling on the side of the Creator. His cause must prevail. The forces of the Nameless One struggle always to silence us. Yes, I would like you to show me a prophecy the way it is meant to be passed on, if you can. He drew himself up, peering at her with burning intensity. At last he spoke softly.
Very well, Sister Margaret.
He leaned toward her, his expression so grave it nearly took her breath away.
Look into my eyes, he whispered. Lose yourself in my eyes.
His gaze drew her in, the deep azure color spreading in her vision until it seemed she was looking up into the clear sky. She felt as if he were drawing every breath for her. I will tell you the prophecy of the true fork again, but this time I will show it to you as it is meant to be. She floated as she listened.
Of all there were, but a single one born of the magic to bring forth truth will remain alive.
The words melted away, and instead she saw the prophecy as if seeing a vision. She was pulled into it. She was no longer in the palace, but in the vision itself. She saw a beautiful woman with long hair, dressed in a satiny white dress, the Mother Confessor. Margaret saw the other confessors being killed by quads, sent from Dahara, and she felt the blinding horror of it. She saw the woman's best friend and sister confessor die in her arms. She felt the grief of the Mother Confessor. Then Margaret saw the Mother Confessor before the one from Dahara who had sent the quads to kill the other confessors. The handsome man in white stood before 3 boxes. To Margaret's surprise, each box cast a different number of shadows. The man in white robes performed rituals, cast evil spells, underworld spells, late into the night, through the night, until the sun rose. As the day brightened, somehow Margaret knew that it was this day. She was seeing what had happened this very day. The man in white had finished with the preparations. He stood before the boxes. Smiling, he reached out and opened the one in the center, the one that cast 2 shadows. Light from within the box bathed him in its brilliance at first, but then, in a flash of power, the magic of the box swirled around him and snuffed out his life. He had chosen wrong. He forfeited his life to the magic he sought to claim. She saw the Mother Confessor with a man she loved. She felt her happiness. It was a joy the woman had never experienced before. Margaret's heart swelled with the bliss the Mother Confessor felt at the sight of this man. It was a vision of what was happening at this very moment. And then Margaret's mind swept forward in a swirl. She saw war and death sweep across the land. She saw death brought by the keeper of the underworld to the world of the living, with a wicked lust that choked her with terror. Again the prophecy swept her forward to a great crowd. At the center was the Mother Confessor, standing on a heavy platform. The people were excited, and in a celebratory mood. This was the joyous event that would bring the fork of the prophecy, one of the forks that must be passed correctly to save the world from the darkness snatching at it. She was caught up in the festive mood of the crowd. She felt a tingle of expectant hope, wondering if the man the Mother Confessor loved was to be the one she was to wed. And if that was the happy event the prophecy spoke of, that would bring joy to the people, her heart ached for it to be so. But something wasn't right. Margaret's warm delight cooled until her flesh prickled with icy bumps. With a wave of worry, Margaret saw that the Mother Confessor's hands were bound, and next to her stood a man, not the man she loved, but a man in a black hood. He held a great axe. Margaret's worry turned to horror. A hand forced the Mother Confessor to kneel, seized her hair, and laid her face to the block. Her hair was short now, not long as it had been before. But it was the same woman. Tears seeped from the Mother Confessor's closed eyes. Her white dress shimmered in the bright sunlight. Margaret couldn't breathe. The great crescent axe rose into the air. It flashed through the sunlight, thunking solidly into the block. Margaret gasped. The Mother Confessor's head dropped into the basket. The crowd cheered. Blood gushed and spread down the dress as the headless, lifeless corpse collapsed to the wooden floor. A pool of bright blood spread under the body, turning the white dress red. So much blood. The crowd roared with elation. A wail of horror escaped Margaret's throat. She thought she might vomit. Nathan caught her as she fell forward, crying and sobbing. He held her to him as a father would a frightened child. "Ah, Nathan, is that the event that will bring joy to the people? Is this what must happen if the world of the living is to be saved?"
"It is," he said softly. "Almost every prophecy down this true branch is a fork. If the world of the living is to be saved from the keeper of the underworld, then every event must take the correct branch. In this prophecy, the people must rejoice at seeing the Mother Confessor die, for down the other fork lies the eternal darkness of the underworld. I don't know why it is so."
Margaret sobbed into his robes as his strong arms held her tight against him. "Oh, dear Creator," she cried, "take mercy on your poor child. Give her strength."
"There is no mercy when fighting the keeper."
"Ah, Nathan, I have read prophecies of people dying, but it was only words. To see it as real has wounded my soul."
He patted her back as he held her. "I know. How well I know."
Margaret pushed herself up, wiping tears from her face. "This is the true prophecy that lies beyond the one that forked today?"
"It is."
"And this is the way they are meant to be seen?"
"It is so. This is the way they come to me. I have shown you the way I see them. The words, too, come with the prophecy. And those are what are to be written down, so those not meant to see the prophecies will not see them as they truly are, but those who are meant to will see them when they read the words. I have never before shown anyone a prophecy."
"Then why have you shown me?"
His sad eyes regarded her a moment. "Margaret, we are in a battle with the Keeper. You are meant to know the danger we are in."
"We are always in a battle with the Keeper."
"I think, perhaps, this is different."
"I must tell the others. I must tell them what you can show them. We must have your help to understand the prophecies."
"No. I will show no other what I have shown you. No matter the pain they would think to inflict upon me, I will not cooperate. I will never again do this for you or another sister."
"But why not?"
"You are not meant to see them, only to read them."
"But that can't be—"
"It is meant to be. Otherwise your gift would work to unlock them. You are not meant to see them, just as you often tell me others with common minds are not meant to hear them."
"But they could help us."
"They would help you no more than the one I told that girl helped her. Or the thousands who died. Just as you keep me a prisoner here, so others may not hear what they are not meant to hear, so I must keep all but another prophet a prisoner of their ignorance. It is the will of He who has given the gift and all else. Had He meant you to, He would have given you the key with your gift, but He has not."
"Nathan, there are others who would hurt you until you revealed it to them."
"I will not reveal it to them, no matter how much they hurt me. They will kill me before I do so."
He tilted his head toward her.
"And they won't try unless you tell them."
She stared at him, seeing him differently than she had ever seen him before. None before had ever been as devious as he. He was the only one they had never been able to trust. All the others had told the truth about their gift and its capabilities, but they knew Nathan lied, knew he was not telling them all he was able to do. She wondered what he knew, what he was capable of. "I will go to my grave with what you have shown me, Nathan." He closed his eyes and nodded. "Thank you, child." There were other sisters who would have hurt him for addressing a sister so. She was not one of them. She stood and straightened her dress. "In the morning I will tell those in the vaults of the prophecy that has forked, and of the ones on the false and on the true branches. They will have to decipher them as best they can with what the Creator has given them." "That is the way it is meant to be." She returned the ink, pen, and sand shaker to the desk drawer. "Nathan, why did you want the prelate to come? I don't recall you ever asking for her before." When she looked up, he was studying her with cool detachment. "That, too, Sister Margaret, is not for you to know. Do you wish to bring me pain to attempt to make me tell you?" She picked up the book of prophecy off the desk. "No, Nathan, I will not do that." "Then, will you deliver a message to the prelate for me?" She nodded, sniffling back the tears that still burned at her eyes. "What would you have me tell her?" "Will you take this, too, to your grave and tell no other but the prelate?" "If you wish it, although I don't see why. You can trust the sisters." "No. Margaret, I want you to listen to me. When it is the keeper you battle, you must not trust anyone. I am taking a dangerous chance in trusting you and the prelate. Trust no one." His bunched eyebrows gave him a frightening look. "Only those you trust can betray you." "All right, Nathan. What is the message?" He peered intently at her. At last his words came in a whisper. "Tell her that the pebble is in the pond." Margaret blinked at him. "What does that mean?" "You have been frightened enough, child. Don't tempt your endurance again." "Sister Margaret, Nathan," she said softly, "I am not child, but Sister Margaret. Please treat me with the respect I am accorded." He smiled. "Forgive me, Sister Margaret." Sometimes his eyes ran shivers up her spine. "One more thing, Sister Margaret." "What is it?" He reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek. "I don't really know of your death." She sighed inwardly with relief. "But I do know something else of importance pertaining to you, of importance in the battle with the Keeper." "If it will help me to bring the Creator's light upon the world, then tell me." He seemed to draw himself inward, looking out at her as if from a great distance. "A time will come soon when you stumble upon something, and you will have need to know the answer to a question. I don't know the question, but when you have the need to find the answer, come to me, and that I will know. This, too, you must tell no other." "Thank you, Nathan." She reached out and touched his hand. "The Creator's blessing on his child." "No, thank you, sister. I do not wish anything more from the Creator." She stared at him in surprise. "Because we keep you locked in here?" His small smile returned. "There are many different kinds of prisons, sister. As far as I am concerned, his blessings are tainted. The only thing worse than being touched by the Creator is being touched by the Keeper, and of that I am not even resolved." She took her hand back. "I will still pray for you, Nathan." "If you care so much for me, then free me." "I'm sorry, I can't do that." "You mean you won't do that?" "Look at it how you will, but you must remain here." At last he turned away from her. She started for the door. "Sister, would you send a woman to visit me, to spend a night or two with me?" The pain in his voice almost made her weep. "I thought you would be beyond that age." He slowly turned to her. "You have a lover, Sister Margaret." She reeled at this. How could he know? He didn't know. He was guessing. She was young and thought attractive by some. Of course she would be interested in men. He was only guessing. But then none of the sisters knew what he was able to do. He was the only wizard they couldn't trust to be truthful about his powers. "You listen to gossip, Nathan?" He smiled.
Tell me, Sister Margaret, do you have the day planned out in advance when you will be too old for love, even if it is only for a time as fleeting as a night? Exactly how old, sister, is it when we lose the need for love? She stood silent, ashamed for a time. I will go myself, Nathan, into the city, and bring back a woman to visit you for a time, even if I must pay her price myself. I can't pledge she will be beautiful to your eyes, as I don't know what your eyes fancy, but I can vow she will not be empty between the ears, as I think you value this more than you will admit. She saw a single tear fall from the corner of his eye. Thank you, Sister Margaret. But Nathan, you must promise me you will tell her no prophecy. He bowed his head slightly. Of course, sister. I swear it on my word as a wizard. I mean it, Nathan. I do not wish to have a part in being responsible for people dying. Not only men died in those battles, but women, too. I could not bear having a part in it. His eyebrows lifted. Not even, Sister Margaret, if one of those women would bear, had she lived, a boy-child who would grow into a brutal tyrant, who would go on to torture and slaughter tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of innocent people, women and children among them? Not even, sister, if you had a chance to choke off this fork of a terrible prophecy. She stood stunned, frozen. At last, she made herself blink. Nathan, she whispered, are you saying... Good night, Sister Margaret. He turned and strode off to the solitude of his small garden, pulling up his black hood as he went. Chapter 6. The wind ripped at her, tugging at her clothes and snapping the loose ends. After yesterday's tangled mess, Kaylin was at least glad she had thought to tie back her hair. She clung to Richard for dear life, pressing the side of her face against his back as she squeezed her eyes tightly shut. It was happening again, the thick feeling of growing heavy that made the knot in the pit of her stomach sink lower of its own accord. She thought she might be sick. She was afraid to open her eyes. She knew what always happened when she felt heavy like this. Richard called back for her to look. She opened her eyes just a little, peeking through narrow, squinting slits. As she suspected, the world was tilted at a crazy angle. Her head spun sickeningly. Why did the dragon have to tip over whenever it made a turn? She could feel herself being pressed against the red scales. She couldn't understand why she wasn't falling off. Richard had told her he had figured out that it was just like when you swung a bucket of water around your head and the water didn't fall out. She had never swung a bucket of water over her head and wasn't entirely sure he was telling the truth about the water not falling out. She looked longingly at the ground and saw what Richard was pointing at. The Mud People's village. Sidon squealed with glee from his place in Richard's lap as Scarlet's huge leathery wings caught the air and pulled them into a tight spiral. As the red dragon plummeted earthward, the knot of Kaylin's stomach felt as if it were coming up in her throat. She didn't understand how they could like doing this. They enjoyed it. They actually enjoyed it. Arms stuck up in the air, they were both laughing with delight, acting like little boys. Well, one was a little boy, and she guessed he had a right. She suddenly smiled, and then laughed herself, not at flying on a dragon, but at seeing how happy Richard was. She would fly on a dragon every day just to see him laughing and happy. She stretched up and kissed the back of his neck. He brought his hands down and rubbed one on each of her legs. She clasped them tighter around him and forgot a little about feeling sick. Richard called forward for Scarlet to land in the open field in the center of the village. The sun was almost down, making the tan, plastered, mud-bricked buildings in the circle of the village stand out brightly in the slanting light. Kaylin could smell the sweet smoke from the cooking fires. The long shadows trailed the people running for cover. Women ran from the cooking shelters and men from their weapons-making, all shouting and calling out. She hoped they wouldn't be too frightened. The last time Scarlet had come here, she had carried Dark and Rahl, and when he didn't find Richard, he had killed people.
These people didn't know Rahl had forced Scarlet to fly him around after he had stolen her egg. Of course, even without Dark and Rahl riding her, no one ever thought of a red dragon as anything but a deadly threat. She herself would have run for her life at seeing a red dragon. The red were the most fearsome of all the dragons, and no one would ever imagine doing anything with a red dragon except trying to kill it or running for his life. No one but Richard, that is. Who else but Richard would think to befriend one? He had risked his life to get her egg free from Rahl's control so she would help him, and in the process had made a friend for life. Although Scarlet still professed her intent to eat him someday, Kaelin suspected it was some private joke between the two, as Richard laughed whenever she said it. At least, Kaelin hoped it was only a joke. She wasn't entirely sure. Kaelin looked down at the village and hoped the hunters didn't start shooting poison arrows before they saw who was riding the red dragon. Sidon suddenly recognized his home. He pointed excitedly and jabbered to Richard in the Mud People's language. Richard couldn't understand a word of it, but smiled and nodded and ruffled Sidon's hair. They both gripped the spikes on Scarlet's back as she pulled out of the steep descent. Dust swept up around them, lifted by the fluttering of Scarlet's huge wings as she settled on the ground. Richard grabbed hold of Sidon and sat the little boy on his broad shoulders, then stood up on Scarlet's back. The stiff, cold breeze carried the dust away to reveal a ragged ring of hunters, their bows drawn, poison arrows pointing up at the three of them. Kaelin held her breath. Grinning, Sidon waved both hands over his head, as Richard had told him to. Scarlet held her head down so the Mud People could get a clear view of who was riding her. The hunters, astonished, cautiously lowered their bows. Kaelin exhaled when she saw the tension come off the bowstrings. A figure in buckskin pants and tunic stepped through the ring of hunters. Long silver hair hung down, spreading over his shoulders. It was the Birdman, his sun-browned face a picture of shock. "It's me, Richard. I have returned. With your help we have defeated Dark and Rahl, and we have brought Savidlin and Wessalan's son back." The Birdman looked at Kaelin as she translated. A beaming grin spread on his face. "We welcome you both back to your people with open arms." Women and children were gathering among the ring of hunters, their dark, mud-slicked hair framing amazed faces. Scarlet lowered her bulky body to the ground, and Richard slid off her shoulder, landing on his boots with a thump. He held Sidon in one arm as he reached up with the other and helped Kaelin down. She was quietly joyful to have her feet on the earth again. Wessalan pushed through the throng, running to them, Savidlin right at her heels. She wailed her son's name. Sidon held his arms out gleefully and practically leapt into her arms. Wessalan alternated between crying and laughing as she tried to hug her son and Richard and Kaelin all at once. Savidlin rubbed his boy's back and looked to her and Richard with wet eyes. "He was brave as any hunter," Kaelin told him. He gave a single, firm, pride-filled nod. He appraised her for a moment and then stepped closer, giving her a gentle slap. "Strength to Confessor Kaelin." Kaelin returned the slap and greeting, and then he threw his arms around her and squeezed her tight for a long time. When finished with hugging her, he straightened his elder's coyote hide on his shoulders and looked up at Richard. He shook his head in wonderment. And then he gave Richard a powerfully hard whack across the jaw, a demonstration of his heartfelt respect for Richard's strength. "Strength to Richard with the temper." Kaelin wished he hadn't done that. She could tell by Richard's eyes that he had a headache. He had had it since yesterday, and she had hoped it would be better after a good sleep the night before in Scarlet's cave. Sidon had played with the little red dragon until he was dead tired, and then had cuddled between them and gone to sleep. Having not slept for days, she thought she would have no trouble sleeping, but she found she didn't want to stop looking at Richard. She had finally put her head on his shoulder, held his hand in both of hers, and fallen asleep smiling. They had all needed the rest. Bad dreams had caused Richard to jerk awake several times in a cold sweat, and even though he had said nothing, she could see in his eyes that he still had the headache. Richard didn't let it bother him, though, and returned Savidlin's slap in kind. "Strength to Savidlin, my friend." Properly greeted, souls protected, Savidlin let his grins and backslaps fly. After they had exchanged greetings with the Birdman, Richard addressed the crowd. "This brave and noble dragon, Scarlet," he called out in a voice for all to hear, even though they couldn't understand the words, "has helped me kill Darken Ral and avenge our murdered people. She has brought us here so Sidon could be returned before his parents could fear for him another night. She is my friend, a friend to the Mud People." Everyone was dumbfounded as Kalin translated. The hunters, at least, puffed up at hearing that an enemy of the Mud People had been killed by one of their own, even if he was one of their own by proclamation and not by birth. The Mud People honored strength, and to them, killing one who harmed their people meant strength. Scarlet's head swung down, her ears twitching. One yellow eye frowned at Richard.
"Friend. Red dragons are friends to no people. We are feared by all."
"You're my friend," Richard smiled. "I'm a person." Scarlet snorted a puff of smoke at him.
"Pah, I will eat you yet."
Richard's grin widened. He pointed at the Birdman. "You see this man? He gave me the whistle that I used to save your egg. If not for that whistle, the Gars might have eaten your little one." He stroked a hand on the bright red snout. "And a wonderful little one it is." Scarlet tilted her head, blinking a big yellow eye at the Birdman.
"I guess he would make a meager snack."
She peered back at Richard, a chuckle rumbling in her throat.
"The whole of the village wouldn't make a decent meal. More trouble than it would be worth."
She brought her head closer to him.
"If they are your friends, Richard Cypher, they are my friends too."
"And Scarlet, this one is called the Birdman because he loves creatures that fly." Scarlet's scaly eyebrows lifted.
"Really?"
She swung her head close to the Birdman, inspecting him anew. The proximity of Scarlet's big head caused a few close to him to back away a step or two. The Birdman held his ground.
"Thank you, Birdman, for helping Richard. He has saved my young one. The Mud People have nothing to fear from me, on my dragon's honor."
The Birdman looked to Kalin as she translated, smiled to Scarlet, and then turned to his people.
"As Richard with the Temper says, this noble dragon Scarlet is a friend to the Mud People. She may hunt our land, and we will bring no harm to her nor her to us."
Cheering erupted from the crowd. For a people to have a dragon as a friend was taken as an honor to their strength. Everyone seemed to be shouting with excitement. They waved their arms in the air and stamped around in little dances. Scarlet joined in the merriment by throwing her head back and sending a roaring column of flames skyward. The people cheered louder. Kalin noticed Richard glancing off to the side. She followed the direction of his gaze to a small band of hunters standing together. None of them were cheering. She recognized their leader. He was the one who had blamed Richard for bringing trouble to their village, blamed Richard for the deaths of Mud People at the hands of Darken Ral. As the hooting and hollering went on, Richard motioned Scarlet toward him. When she lowered her head, he put his face right in her ear. She listened to whatever he was saying and then pulled her head back, regarding him with a big yellow eye. She nodded. Richard held out the carved bone whistle hanging from a leather thong at his neck as he turned to the Birdman. "You gave me this as a gift, but told me it would never aid me because I could only call all the birds at once. I think maybe the good spirits wanted it that way. This gift helped me save everyone from Darken Ral. It helped me save Kalin. Thank you." The Birdman smiled at the translation. Richard whispered in Kalin's ear that he would be back in a short time, and then climbed up on Scarlet. "Honored Elder, Scarlet and I would like to give you a small gift. We would like to take you up in the air, so you may see where your beloved birds fly." He extended a hand to the Birdman. The Elder, upon hearing the translation, looked apprehensively at Scarlet. Her vibrant red scales were glossy in the late afternoon sun, undulating with her breathing. Her tail reached nearly to the mud-brick homes across the field. The dragon unfolded her wings and lazily stretched them. He looked at Richard, who was still offering his hand to him. A little boy grin lit the Elder's face. It made Calen laugh. He clasped Richard's arm and hoisted himself up. Savidlin strode over and stood by Calen as the dragon rose into the air. The people cheered their approval as they watched the dragon, lifting their honored elder into the air. Calen wasn't seeing the dragon. She saw only Richard. She could hear the birdman laughing as Scarlet carried them up and away. She hoped he was still laughing after Scarlet made a turn. Savidlin glanced at her. "He is a rare person, Richard with the temper." She smiled and nodded. Her gaze went across the way to the man who wasn't cheering or happy. "Savidlin, who is that man?" "Chandalin. He blames Richard for Dark and Rahl coming here and killing people." The wizard's first rule came to her mind. People will believe anything. If it wasn't for Richard, Dark and Rahl would rule us all now, the same Dark and Rahl who killed those people. Savidlin shrugged. "Not everyone who has eyes can see. Remember the elder you killed? Tofalar? That was his uncle." She nodded absently. "Wait here." Calen walked across the field, pulling the tie from her hair as she went. She was still dazed by the knowledge that Richard loved her and that he couldn't be harmed by her magic. It was hardly possible to believe she, a confessor, could ever experience love. It went against everything she had ever been taught. She just wanted to take Richard somewhere alone and kiss him and hug him until they were old. There was no way she was going to allow this man, Chandalin, to bring any harm to Richard. Now that she and the man she loved could somehow magically be together, she wasn't going to allow anything to jeopardize that. The mere thought of anyone harming Richard brought the blood rage, the Kandar, boiling up inside her. She had never known about the Kandar before, had never known it was part of her magic, until she brought it forth when she thought Richard had been killed. Since then, she felt it within her, just as she always felt the rest of the Confessor's magic.